For 20 years, he'd treated dogs that bit out of pain. Now, standing before him was a predator with 3 rows of teeth that had just gutted a deer. Anyone else would have run. He dropped to his knees and held out an open palm. The cold gnawed at his bones from the inside. Ethan opens his eyes and sees fir branches, a gray, unfamiliar sky. He lies on the ground in his flannel shirt. Gloves bulge in his back pocket. Everything is as it was. Everything except the place. He sits up. His head is buzzing. The smell of blood hits his nose before he even looks around. 3 meters away lies a deer. Or, rather, what used to be a deer. Its chest is torn open, ribs sticking out. Its guts are sprawled across the grass. And standing over the mess is a creature, the size of a pony, ash-gray scales. Its snout is covered in black, smoldering slime. Its mouth is slightly open, 3 rows of teeth, yellow eyes with vertical pupils. The creature stares him down. His brain produces a single thought. This isn't Oregon. This isn't Earth. And this thing is about to decide he's dessert. The creature growls. A low, guttural sound vibrates in the air. Ethan doesn't run, not because he's brave. His body switches to a different program before fear reaches his legs. He notices. The left front paw. The creature isn't putting weight on it. It shifts its weight to the right. It's limping. Its side trembles with a fine quiver, not from the cold, from pain. Something darkens between the scales on its ribs, and it doesn't growl like a predator before an attack. No leaning forward, no flattened ears, no tension in the hind legs for a leap. It growls like a cornered dog in the waiting room. It is more afraid than he is. Ethan drops to his knees. The movement is smooth, no jerks. He extends an open palm. His fingers are relaxed. That's how he used to reach out to the Rottweilers they brought in at 3 in the morning, foaming at the mouth. He speaks, quietly, evenly. The words mean nothing. It's the tone that matters. Low, monotonous, without threat. The creature freezes. The growl breaks off. Yellow eyes blink. Once, twice. She tilts her head, and at that moment, warmth flares in Ethan's chest, something between a sip of hot coffee and an electric shock. It spreads from his sternum to his hands. A voice echoes in his head. Calm, like a notary reading a document. A lifelong bond is registered. A connection is established. Ethan freezes with his hand outstretched, and suddenly, he feels her. He doesn't see her. He doesn't hear her. He feels her. A dull, throbbing pain in his paw. Hunger. 3 days of exhausting hunger. And fear. The immense, primal fear of a creature that realizes it is wounded and can no longer hunt. His own hand trembles, but not from fear, from a weariness that isn't his. He stands up. The creature doesn't move. He takes a step. She doesn't back away. Another step. He crouches down beside it. So close he can feel the heat of its scales. It smells of smoke and raw meat. He places his palm on the back of its neck. The scales are hot and dry. The creature shudders. Then it lowers its head, lies down, stretches out its injured paw, and Ethan understands. It's showing him where it hurts, like a dog that has finally found someone who understands. He pulls on gloves, takes the paw. His fingers probe the joint. No fracture, no dislocation. But between the scales he finds a thorn, a shard of something bony, as long as a finger. It's gone in deep. There's inflammation all around. The edges are hot and swollen. A couple more days and the paw is beyond saving. He has no tools, no antiseptic, no painkillers, just him, gloves, and 20 years of working with those who bite when they're in pain. He pinches the splinter between 2 fingers. The creature freezes. He starts that same monotonous melody in his voice again. He pulls, in one smooth motion, without jerking. The thorn comes out. The creature twitches and whimpers. Not a roar, not a growl, a whimper, like a puppy whose tail has been stepped on. Thick, black blood flows from the wound. Ethan presses a flap of fabric torn from the hem of his shirt against it. He holds it. The creature's emotions wash over him in waves through their new connection. Pain, relief, and something resembling surprise. 20 minutes later, the bleeding stops. He removes the patch. The edges of the wound are already closing. Not at human speed, much faster. The creature lifts its head, looks at its paw, then at him, and nudges his palm with its snout. A wet nose, hot breath. Ethan sits on pine needles in a strange world, wearing a blood-stained shirt. Next to him is a creature that could have killed him 10 minutes ago, and now it's nudging his hand like a Labrador asking to be scratched behind the ear. He laughs, quietly and a little hysterically. He speaks aloud. "All right, so now I have you." The creature snorts. Black slime splatters onto his jeans. He looks at the stain, looks at the creature, speaks. "I'll call you Ash, the color of ashes, and because I need something to hold on to right now." Ash blinks. Ethan takes this as consent. He stands up. His knees creak. He's 26, but right now he feels 50. Forest all around. Fir trees, moss, ferns up to his waist. No roads, no signs of civilization. The air smells of pine needles and something sweet. Birds are singing, bird-like. But the sound is slightly different. Too low, too rhythmic. Yasin is already on all fours. His left paw trembles but bears his weight. He speaks. "We need water, and people, preferably in that order." Yasin turns his head eastward. He doesn't know how, but he's certain. There's water there. He walks. Yasin strides alongside him, slightly ahead and to the left, like a service dog that knows its place in the pack. The deer stays behind. He doesn't even think of taking the meat. They walk for 3 hours. The forest doesn't change, but Ethan notices details. Some trees are charred, not from a fire. The marks come from the inside, as if the tree burned from the core outward. On one trunk, he finds furrows. 5 parallel lines, deep, wide. Claws, very large claws. Something 5 times the size of Ash passed through here and left a mark. Through their bond, he senses recognition. Ash knows these tracks, and she doesn't like it. She quickens her pace. He doesn't argue. They find water in half an hour. A stream, narrow, cold, clear. Ethan drops to his knees and drinks until his stomach cramps. Yasin drinks beside him, long and thirstily. Her side stops trembling. The pain in the bond subsides to a faint hum. He sits down on a rock. He looks at his hands. His gloves are covered in black blood. His shirt is torn. He was a veterinary technician from Portland. He was driving home from an emergency call. He fell asleep at the wheel. And now he's here, with an ash-colored hound and a voice in his head that keeps harping on about his life's duty. He sees smoke at sunset. A thin wisp rises from behind the hill to the east. Smoke means fire. Fire means people. Ethan stands up. He sends Ash the only thing he can convey without words: calm. They walk toward the smoke. The climb takes 20 minutes. From the top, he sees a village. 30 houses, wooden walls, thatched roofs, a palisade around the perimeter. Smoke is coming from the chimneys. Figures are moving in the yards. People. Real people. And immediately, he realizes the problem. He is standing on a hill with a scaly creature the size of a pony. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't know the customs. And judging by the torn-apart deer and the size of Yasin's teeth, the locals have every reason to fear such creatures. He sits down. He speaks. "I need you to wait here." Through the bond, he senses her disagreement, anxiety, reluctance to let him go. He places his hand on her muzzle. He speaks. "I'll be back." I promise. Yasin lies down in the ferns, reluctantly. Yellow eyes watch him as he descends. He looks back once. She lies where he left her, tail wrapped around her body, muzzle on her paws. And through the bond, one long, whining feeling. Don't leave me. Ethan came down the hill and approached the stockade. Up close, the village looked different than from above. The stockade logs were charred on the outside, claw marks on the wood, fresh. A gate made of thick planks bound with iron strips. A man stood by the gate, broad-shouldered, with an axe on his shoulder. He saw Ethan and froze. Then he shouted something over his shoulder. Ethan stopped. He raised his hands, open palms, a universal gesture. The man at the gate looked at him suspiciously. A minute later, two more approached, one with a spear, the second unarmed but carrying a lantern. They were talking amongst them. Ethan didn't understand a word. The language was unfamiliar, soft, with long vowels. He stood with his hands raised and smiled. It was the only thing he could do. The man with the lantern came closer. He shone the light on his face, then on his clothes. The jeans and flannel shirt clearly raised questions for him. He asked something, and Ethan said, "I don't understand, I need help." The man frowned. He repeated the question. Ethan shook his head. He pointed to his mouth, then he spread his hands. "I don't understand." The man with the flashlight turned to the others. He said something. His tone changed. It became less tense. Apparently, a strange man in unfamiliar clothes who didn't speak the local language and was standing with his hands up wasn't the biggest threat they'd ever seen. They let him in. Not into the house, into the shed by the gate. They gave him a bowl of something hot, porridge, thick, with chunks of meat. Ethan ate it all in 3 minutes. His stomach stopped cramping. They gave him a skin and pointed to the corner. "Sleep here." A gesture understood in every language. Ethan lay down. Through the connection he sensed Yasin. She was on the hill. She wasn't sleeping. She was waiting. Her hunger pulsed in his stomach as a second layer over his own fullness. He thought that in the morning he needed to find her some food. Then he thought that in the morning he needed to find a way to communicate with these people. Then he fell asleep. The morning began with a scream. Ethan jumped up. Voices were making noise outside. Many voices. He peeked out of the shed. A crowd at the gate. About 20 people. Men with weapons. Spears. Axes. One with a net. They were gathering for something. A hunt. Or war. He went out. The cold morning air smelled of smoke and wet earth. The man with the lantern from yesterday saw him. He approached. He gestured. "Come here. Look." He led Ethan to the gate. He pointed north. Beyond the stockade lay a meadow. Beyond the meadow, a ravine. And something was moving in the ravine. Something big and dark. Ethan squinted. A beast, the size of a bull. A massive body. Short, powerful legs. Bony growths jutted out from its back and along its spine. Its hide was dark, almost black. Tusks protruded from beneath its upper lip. A boar. But not the kind of boar Ethan knew. This one was different. Its tail was long and strange. It moved independently of its body. It writhed. At the tip of the tail, something dark swirled like smoke. Shadow tail. Ethan didn't know that word, but the hunters used it often. They pointed at the beast. Their voices were excited, the thrill of the hunt. They were getting ready to go finish it off. Ethan looked closer. The boar was moving strangely, in jerks, lurching onto its right side, rising again. Something was sticking out of its left side, long, dark, a fragment of a spear shaft. It was already wounded. Through the bond, Ethan sensed Yasin on the hill raise her head. She sensed the beast too, its pain, its rage, its agony. The hunters moved out. Ethan followed them. No one stopped him. A strange outsider in unfamiliar clothes. Let him watch. They surrounded the ravine, skillfully, from 3 sides, spears forward. The boar stood below, gasping. Foam was coming from its mouth, black, thick. The spear shaft was lodged deep in its side. With every breath the beast took, Blood oozed from the wound, dark. Ethan watched and saw what the hunters didn't see. The spear shaft had pierced the lung, maybe both. The foam from its mouth was blood mixed with air. The beast was choking on its own blood. It had 10 minutes left, maybe 15. It was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. The hunters began to shout. They pounded their spears against the ground. They were driving it in. The boar spun around. It tried to attack. It took 2 steps and collapsed to its knees. Its front legs buckled. It fell onto its side. Its tusks plowed into the ground. Its tail lashed against the rocks. The smoky shadow at its tip was fading and flickering. The hunters roared with delight. Prey, victory, a large second-rank beast, meat, bones, hide, glory. They began to descend into the ravine with their spears at the ready. To finish it off, Ethan watched. The beast lay on its side. One eye looked up, large, dark. There was no rage in it. There was fatigue. There was pain. And there was something Ethan had seen hundreds of times in the eyes of animals on the operating table. Humility. He didn't make a decision. The decision made him. Ethan leaped into the ravine. The hunters shouted. He didn't hear them. He was already beside the boar. The beast twitched, tried to lift its head, couldn't. Black foam gushed from its mouth. Ethan fell to his knees beside its head. A huge eye stared at him. Ethan placed his palm on the beast's snout. Hot, wet, trembling. He spoke, in the same voice he'd used with Yasin, low, evenly, calmly. The boar stopped twitching. Hunters at the edge of the ravine were shouting. One climbed down, another grabbed his arm. Everyone was pointing at Ethan. A madman, a suicide, a dead man. Ethan paid no attention. He examined the wound. The shaft was broken at the base. The tip was inside. It had entered between the 4th and 5th ribs. The angle of entry indicated penetration into the lower lobe of the left lung. The diaphragm might be damaged, pneumothorax, hemothorax, or both at once. On the ground, without instruments, without anesthesia, without an assistant. He had his hands, gloves, and a single torn flannel shirt. He pulled on the gloves. He straddled the beast's head. He pressed his knee into the nape of its neck. The boar weighed as much as a small car. Its head beneath Ethan was the size of a barrel. The tusks could have ripped a man open from groin to throat in a single motion. But the beast lay motionless. Only its eyes followed the man. Ethan grabbed the broken shaft, clutched it with both hands, pulled, steadily, no jerking, just as he'd been taught. If the tip was jagged, a jerk would tear the flesh even more. Pull slowly, feel the resistance. If it got stuck, change the angle. The shaft started to come out, heavily, with a wet crunch. The boar bellowed. Ethan felt that roar with his whole body. The ground shook. The hunters up above recoiled. He didn't let go. He pulled on. The shaft came out. The tip came out with it, iron, rusty, with bone fragments on the barbs. Blood gushed from the wound, a lot. Ethan clamped both hands over the wound. Blood flowed through his fingers, hot, thick, pulsing. He tore a sleeve from his shirt, crumpled it, pressed it against the wound. Pressure, direct, constant pressure. Hold, don't let go, he whispered, quietly, in English, words he'd spoken to hundreds of animals. Quiet, buddy, quiet. I'm here. I won't let you go. You won't go. The boar was breathing, heavily, hoarsely, but breathing. The foam at its mouth grew lighter. The bleeding slowed. Ethan held on. A minute, 2, 5. His hands went numb. His back burned. His knees dug into the ground down to the rocks. He didn't move. 10 minutes later, the boar raised its head. 20 minutes later, it tried to stand. 30 minutes later, it was on its feet. It was staggering, but it was standing. The warmth in Ethan's chest flared up again. A life debt was registered. The connection was established. For the second time in 24 hours. Ethan sensed the beast, all of it. Pain in his ribs, a heaviness in his lung. But through the pain, something new. Something the creature had never felt in its life. Calm. The hunters at the edge of the ravine were silent. No one moved. They watched as a man in blood-stained clothes, unarmed, stood next to a second-rank shadowtail. And the beast wasn't killing him. The beast stood beside him, and its tail was no longer thrashing. The dark smoke at the tip of the tail settled. It settled. It wrapped around the beast's leg like a cat wraps its tail around its paws when it sits down. Ethan placed his hand on the boar's neck. The beast turned its massive head toward him. Ethan said, "I will call you Thunder, because when you roared in pain, I thought the earth would crack." Thunder snorted. Clots of blood shot from his nostrils. They splattered onto Ethan's boots, the second time that day. He was starting to notice a pattern. Ethan led Thunder out of the ravine, slowly, step by step. The boar walked with difficulty, but he walked. The hunters parted, silently. Some gripped their spears, others just stood with their mouths open. One of the hunters made a gesture with his hand. Ethan didn't know its meaning, but from the context, it was something between a prayer and a curse. The man with the lantern from yesterday stood at the village gate. He watched. His face was unreadable. Ethan led Thunder to the gate. Ash. He sensed her through the bond. She was coming down the hill, quickly. Her anxiety had turned to impatience. 5 minutes later, the ash hound emerged from the ferns at the edge of the meadow. The hunters grabbed their weapons. Ethan stood between them and Yasin. He raised his hands. He shook his head. No. Yasin approached. She sniffed Grom. Grom tilted his head. They stood side by side, 2 beasts and 1 man, at the village gate, and an old woman who peered out from the nearest house crossed herself and said something. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he caught the tone. A saint, or a witch, something in between. For the first week, Ethan lived in the barn. Grom lay behind the stockade in the ravine from which he'd been pulled out. Yasin slept outside against the barn wall. In the mornings, Ethan would wake up and sense them both. Yasin's hunger, a dull ache in Grom's ribs, his own exhaustion, 3 bodies in 1 consciousness. He was getting used to it. The village wasn't getting used to it. People gave him a wide berth. Children pointed. Women pulled their children away by the hand. Men watched from their doorsteps. Spears were always nearby. Ethan understood. He would be just as frightened. A strange man with 2 monsters. In his place, the village had every right to be afraid. The language came slowly. For the first 3 days, he memorized 10 words a day. He pointed at an object. He listened. He repeated. Water, bread, fire, tree, hand, foot, yes, no, thank you, dangerous. The man with the lantern turned out to be the village elder. His name was Bran, stocky, gray-haired, with a blacksmith's hands and a school teacher's eyes. Bran wasn't afraid of Ethan, or perhaps he was, but didn't show it. He brought food twice a day, sat across from him, pointed at things and named them, slowly, patiently, as if with a child. Ethan soaked it all in. By the end of the first week, he could form a simple sentence. I am not an enemy. The animals are with me. Do not touch them. Bran nodded, but in his eyes remained a question to which Ethan had no words. On the 4th day, Ethan found a way to earn trust, not with words, with action. One of the farmers had a lame horse. Ethan saw it from the barn. The man was pulling the horse by the reins. The horse resisted. Its right hind leg didn't touch the ground. Ethan went out. He approached. The man backed away. Ethan pointed at the horse, then at himself, then at the horse again. The man didn't understand. Ethan simply crouched down next to the horse. It flinched. He spoke, the same tone. The horse calmed down. He examined the leg. A hoof abscess. A pus-filled sac under the hoof capsule. It hurts, but not life-threatening. Need a knife. He gestured. A knife. I need a knife. And hot water. The man brought both. 20 minutes later, Ethan lanced the abscess. He cleaned out the pus, rinsed it, wrapped the hoof in a strip of clean cloth. The horse put its leg on the ground, carefully, then more confidently. The man watched. His wife watched from the doorway of the house. Neighbors watched over the fence. Ethan stood up, wiped his hands, said the only thing he could in the local dialect. I'll take a look again tomorrow. The man nodded, slowly. On the 5th day, a woman came with a goat that had a swelling. On the 6th day, a boy dragged in a dog with a laceration on its ear. On the seventh day, Biran led Ethan to a farmer whose cow couldn't calve. The calf was coming out the wrong way. Ethan rolled up his sleeves. He smeared his hands with the lard the owners had given him. And he did what he had done dozens of times in Oregon. He turned the calf around, pulled it out, alive. The cow stood up an hour later. The calf was suckling milk. The farmer knelt there and wept, not out of joy, out of relief. That cow was the only thing standing between his family and a hungry winter. Ethan sat nearby on the straw, covered in slime and blood up to his elbows, and he thought, this is what he knows how to do. This is what he understands. Not swords, not magic, not intrigue. Hands covered in someone else's blood, and a living creature that breathes because he didn't let it stop. By the end of the first week, the village had stopped fearing him. Not everyone, but most. They moved him from the barn to a small room next to Bran's house. They fed him at the common table. The children came closer. One boy, about 8 years old, started following him around. Ethan taught him to wash his hands before touching wounds. The boy looked at him as if he were a magician. Ethan thought, if only you knew where I learned these things. Nothing magical. Textbooks. Practice. 600 hours of clinical rotations. Sleepless nights in the operating room where it smells of antiseptic and coffee. But here, it was magic. Here, a man who could turn a calf in the womb was a miracle worker. Ethan took it all in with a slight dizziness. Lienne arrived on the 8th day. Ethan was standing by the well, washing his gloves. She appeared from around the corner of Bran's house. Short, blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun, a calm face, attentive gray eyes. The apron was smeared with something green. Bundles of herbs stuck out of her pocket. She was limping, her right leg, her knee, an old injury. Ethan noticed it before he noticed her face. Professional habit. She stopped 3 steps away. She looked at him. Then she held out a bundle of coarse cloth. Ethan took it. He unwrapped it. Bandages. Real bandages. Strips of clean, boiled and folded into neat rolls. And next to them, 3 small clay pots. He opened one. Ointment. It smelled of herbs. He opened the second. Another ointment. It smelled of pine needles and something bitter. The third pot contained powder. Light yellow. The smell was sharp. Ethan looked at the woman. She said something. He understood 2 words. For the beast. She had brought this for Grom, or for Yason.
She knew he needed bandages and brought them herself. Ethan said, "Thank you." She nodded, turned around, walked back, limping. Every step with her right leg was shorter than the left. Her knee didn't bend all the way. Ethan watched her go and thought, lateral patellar dislocation, or a medial collateral ligament injury, or both. It hadn't been treated, or it had been treated incorrectly. The compensatory gait indicated chronic instability. He thought, I could help. Then he thought, she didn't ask. Then he thought, not yet. He learned her name from Bran that same evening. Lienne Moreau, herbalist, midwife, lives alone on the edge of the village. She knows every herb within a day's walk. She treats everyone, livestock and people. She's walked like that since she was 16. She fell off a horse. Her knee hasn't bent properly since. She had a fiancé. He left. Bran said this briefly, without details, but the tone said enough. Ethan nodded. He didn't ask anything. Lienne came 3 more times over the next few days. She brought herbs, ointments. Once she brought a small knife with a bone handle, a surgical knife, locally made, rough but sharp. Ethan turned it over in his hands. The blade was straight. The edge was uneven but serviceable. He looked at her. He said in broken local, "Good knife." She smiled slightly. It was the first time he'd seen her smile, quickly, with the corner of her lips, and she hid it right away. On the 10th day, Ethan examined Grom in daylight. The wound was healing, faster than in any earthly animal, but there was still a wheeze in the lung. Ethan put his ear to the beast's side, wet wheezing in the lower lobe. Fluid, not pus, blood or serous effusion. It needed drainage, or time, or both. He decided to wait. Grom let him do anything. Touch, listen, press on the sore spot. The beast lay on its side and breathed slowly.
Through the bond, Ethan sensed patience, dull and massive, just like the boar itself. Yasin lay nearby. She accepted Grom calmly, like a dog accepts a new pup in the house. Sniffed him, snorted, walked away. Now they lay together, two creatures that should have been dead. Ethan sat between them and changed the bandage on Grom's side. The village children watched from behind the bushes. He saw them. They thought they were hiding. Ethan didn't shoo them away. Let them watch. Let them see that the creature everyone feared was lying quietly and letting a man poke around in its wound. Let it stick in their minds. On the 12th day, Bran led him to the eastern wall of the stockade, showed him the tracks, claws, fresh, 5 furrows, deep, just like the ones Ethan had seen in the forest on the first day. Bran spoke slowly so Ethan would understand. It's coming, at night, every new moon, the creature from the rift, a big one. We're losing livestock, sometimes people. Ethan looked at the furrows, then at Bran. The days passed more quickly. Ethan established a routine. The morning began with an examination of Grom and Yasin. Grom's wound was closing. The wheezing in his lungs had quieted. On the 15th day, the beast got up and walked through the ravine, slowly, with difficulty, but on its own 2 feet. Ethan stood nearby and watched. Through their bond, he felt the pain in the boar's ribs give way to a tingling sensation. Healing. Yasin was already running freely. Her paw had fully healed. The hound hunted in the forest beyond the village. She brought Ethan small animals and laid them at his door, just as a cat brings mice to its master. Ethan made broth from them. The locals watched as he butchered Yasin's catch and shook their heads, a commoner eating what a beast had brought. The world had turned upside down. After his morning rounds, Ethan worked. The village realized he was useful. A line formed to see him after breakfast. Horses, goats, sheep, dogs. One man brought a bull with an abscess on its jaw. Ethan cut it open, rinsed it, bandaged it. The man offered a coin. Ethan didn't know the value of the local currency. He took it. Later, Bran explained, a copper crown, enough for 3 loaves of bread. Ethan thought, 3 loaves for a bull's abscess. In Portland, he'd get $80 for that kind of work. Here, 3 loaves. Nothing had changed. Veterinarians are underpaid in any world. Lienne started coming by more often, not just with supplies. She would sit next to him while he worked. She watched. She was silent. Sometimes she handed him instruments before he even asked. She saw what he needed before he reached out. A good assistant. No, more than an assistant. She was a healer in her own right. She knew the anatomy of the local animals better than he did. She knew which herbs reduced inflammation, which ones stopped the bleeding, which ones relieved pain. Ethan didn't know the local flora and fauna. Lienne filled in those gaps. On the 16th day, they worked together on a mare with a deep wound on her shoulder. Yasin lay nearby, and the mare didn't panic. The hound's presence had a calming effect on the horse. Ethan couldn't explain it. Maybe it was a connection. Maybe it was just Yasin's nature. Lienne handed him ointment and bandages. Their hands sometimes touched over the wound. She didn't pull away. He didn't pay any attention. Work is work. In the evenings, Ethan studied the language. Bran and Lienne were his main teachers. Bran spoke slowly and repeated things 3 times. Lienne spoke softly and used gestures. By the end of the 3rd week, Ethan could hold a simple conversation. He could explain what he was doing and why. He could ask for directions. He could ask for a specific herb or tool. His grammar was shaky. He mixed up genders, but they understood him, and he understood them, enough to hear the conversations taking place behind his back. He's a witcher. No, he's a saint. No, he's a charlatan. He summons creatures without the seal. That's impossible. The church will find out. We're finished. Ethan heard. He remembered. He kept silent. Seals. He learned about them from Bran on the 17th day. Bran sat across from him by the hearth. He spoke slowly, choosing simple words. The seal of subjugation, an artifact of the Church of the Bright Circle. The only way to bind a creature. Without the seal, the creature does not serve. It kills, or it leaves. The seal costs as much as the entire village's annual harvest. It is issued only to nobles. A commoner with the seal is like a fish on a tree. Impossible. Against the law. Against nature. Against the will of the bright circle. Bran looked at Ethan. He asked, "How do you do it, without the seal?" Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know. I just heal them, and they stay." Bran looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "If the church finds out, they'll come, and they won't ask how. They'll ask why, and then they'll stop asking." Ethan nodded. He understood. The 20th day, 3 days before the new moon, Ethan was getting ready. He didn't know exactly what was coming out of the rift. Bran had described it. Big, black, fast, with claws that cut through wood like paper. It comes at night, takes the livestock. Last spring it took a shepherd. They found only his boots. Ethan listened. He thought. He had no weapons, no seals, no magic. He had ash and thunder. The hound had fully recovered, fast, strong. Her scales reflected the light like metal. Thunder stood on her feet confidently. The wound had healed. The wheezing was gone. The boar moved through the ravine with a heavy but steady gait. Its tusks glinted in the morning light. Its tail, with dark smoke at the tip, moved smoothly and powerfully once more. 2 second-rank beasts, against something even Bran couldn't name. Ethan understood the situation. He wasn't a warrior. He couldn't command the beasts like an army. He sensed them. They sensed him. But the bond isn't a leash, it's a partnership. Ash and Thunder would follow him, not because he ordered them to, because they chose to. The 22nd day, the eve of the new moon, Ethan sat on the porch of Bran's house. Lienne sat beside him. She was silent. She was looking at the sky. The moon was as thin as a knife blade. Tomorrow, it would be gone entirely. Lienne said, "You don't have to. You can leave. Take your beasts and leave before dawn." Ethan looked at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the moon. He said, "I'm a veterinarian." She turned to him. She didn't understand the word. He said, "I treat those who are in pain. People, animals, it doesn't matter. If something comes here and causes pain, I have to be here." Lienne was silent. Then she said quietly, "They'll kill you." Ethan replied, "Maybe." She stood up. She left. Limping in the darkness. Right leg, left, right. An uneven rhythm. Ethan sat and listened to her footsteps until they faded into the silence. Through the connection, he sensed it. Yasin curled up behind the house, asleep. Grom stands in the ravine, awake, looking north, toward where the creature comes from. The boar wasn't afraid. Ethan sensed something else in him. Readiness. The heavy, calm readiness of a beast that knows there will be a fight tomorrow. New moon night. The sky is black. No moon, no stars. Clouds have covered everything. The village is awake. Lights burn in every window. Men stand on the walls with torches and spears. Women and children are inside their homes. Doors are locked. Shutters are closed. Ethan stood at the gate, Yasin beside him, Grom behind him. Bran stood to the left with an axe, 4 hunters to the right. Silence, thick, oppressing. Only the crackling of the torches, and somewhere far to the north, a sound. Low. Not a growl, not a howl, something in between. A vibration that made his teeth itch.
Yasin raised her head. The fur on her neck stood on end. Her scales bristled. Through the bond, Ethan received a single word. Not a word. An image, a scent, a creature, a large one. It's already close. Thunder turned northward. He lowered his head. Tusk forward. The smoke on his tail thickened and turned black. Ethan stood between his beasts and the village. He held a torch in his hands, his only weapon. He thought, "I'm a veterinary technician from Portland. I treat horses and snakes. I have no sword, no magic, no seals. I have an ash-colored hound with the temperament of a mutt, and a boar the size of a car from whose lung I pulled a spear 2 weeks ago, and a torch. That should be enough." The creature emerged from the darkness. It was bigger than he expected, much bigger. First, Eyes appeared from the darkness. 2, red, at the height of a second story. Then a silhouette emerged. A long body, low to the ground, pressed against the earth like a lizard, but the size of a bus. 6 legs, each ending in claws that carved furrows in the ground with every step. Black scales with a purple sheen. On its back, a bony ridge, a thick, long tail. It trailed behind the creature, leaving a furrow in the mud. The mouth. The mouth was the worst part, wide, from ear to ear, if it had ears. Teeth not in 3 rows like Yasin's, in 5. The creature moved slowly. It was in no hurry. It knew this village. It came here every new moon, took what it wanted, left. No one interfered. Torches on the walls cast jagged shadows upon it. Hunters on the walls froze. One dropped his spear. It fell with a dull thud. The creature turned its head at the sound. Red eyes flashed. Yasin growled, a low, vibrating sound. A warning, not an attack. Territory. Through the link, Ethan could feel her. Fear. But not the kind of fear that makes you run. The kind that makes you fight. Grom lowered his head even further. His tusks almost touched the ground. The smoke trailing from his tail spread out to the sides and lay across the grass like a black mist. The creature stopped, 20 paces from the gate. It looked at Yasin and Grom. It tilted its head, sniffed, and Ethan suddenly understood. It was surprised. Before, there had been nothing here that could stand against it. Spears and torches are no threat to a creature of this size. But 2 second-rank beasts at the gate is a different story. The creature didn't know what to do. It was used to easy prey. This was not easy prey. The creature growled. The sound was such that Ethan felt it in his chest. The vibration traveled through the ground. The torch in his hand trembled. Yasin responded. A short, sharp bark, like a gunshot. Grom was silent. He stood, heavy, motionless, like a wall. The beast took a step forward. Thunder took a step forward. The beast stopped. They stood facing each other. A boar the size of a horse and a lizard the size of a bus. Disproportionate, hopeless. But Thunder didn't move. Ethan could feel it through the connection. The boar wasn't going to back down. He stood before the man who had pulled him back from death, and he wasn't going to let anything pass him by. The creature lunged forward, quickly, too fast for a creature of that size. 6 paws dug into the ground and propelled its body forward in a single burst. Its jaws snapped open. Ethan saw 5 rows of teeth in the darkness of its throat. Grom met it head-on. He didn't dodge. He didn't back down. He took the blow on his tusks. The collision was such that Ethan was thrown back by the shock wave. He fell onto his back. The torch flew out of his hand. It rolled across the ground. Yasin leaped. She darted from the side. She clamped onto the creature's hind paw. Her teeth sank between the scales. The creature howled and spun around. Its tail swept in an arc. Yasin was sent flying. She slammed into the palisade. Ethan felt the impact through the bond, like a hammer to the ribs. He curled up on the ground. Yasin got to her feet. She staggered and rushed forward again. Ethan stood up. The world was spinning. Through the bond, he could feel them both. Thunder's fury, cold, stone hard. The fury of a creature that knows no retreat. Yasin's pain, sharp. In her left side, a rib, a crack or a fracture. But the hound didn't stop. She circled the beast, bit, jumped back, bit again, distracted it, gave Grom time. The boar struck with its tusks, from bottom to top, like a horseshoe. Each blow left white furrows on the creature's scales. But it didn't pierce through. The scales were too thick. The creature pinned Grom down. Its front paws pressed him to the ground. Claws dug into his sides. Ethan felt the boar's pain, burning, sharp. The claws tore through the skin. Grom roared, that very roar that made the earth tremble. But he was pinned down. The creature tilted its head. Its jaws opened over Grom's neck. Ethan ran, without thinking, without a plan. He ran toward them, grabbed the torch from the ground, reached them, swung it, and jabbed the burning end into the creature's eye. A red eye. The fire entered it like butter. The creature recoiled. It let go of Grom. It shook its head. Something black and smoky oozed from the damaged eye. It howled. The sound was so loud that Ethan's eardrums would have burst if Yasin hadn't thrown herself at the creature's face at that moment and knocked its jaws askew.
Grom got to his feet. Blood was flowing down his sides from 4 wounds, but he got to his feet and struck. This time not at the scales, at the soft spot, the underbelly. His tusks sank between the plates of armor, deep. The creature trembled, its whole body, as if from an electric shock. Yasin was hanging onto its snout. The hound's teeth clamped down on its lower jaw. The creature tried to shake it off. It couldn't. Grom pressed down, driving the tusks deeper. The creature backed up. 1 step, 2, 3. It collapsed onto its side. 6 paws scraped the ground. Its tail thrashed. The thunder receded. Yasin let go. The creature lay on its side, wheezing. Black blood flowed from its underbelly, a lot of it. 1 eye had gone out. The other stared at the sky. Red, dull, fading. Ethan stood over it, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking. The torch had burned down to half its length. The creature lay at his feet, dying. He looked at her and saw what he always saw. Not a monster, a patient. Lacerated wounds in the lower abdomen, a damaged eye, internal bleeding. 6 paws scratching the ground, growing weaker by the moment. Breathing was raspy and ragged. This creature had 10 minutes left, maybe 15, just like Grom in that ravine 3 weeks ago. Ethan stood there. Yasin stood beside him. Through the bond, he could feel it. The hound was waiting for his decision. Grom stood heavily. Blood dripped from his wounds onto the ground. He was waiting too. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the creature. The hunters on the walls shouted. Bran yelled something, a warning. Don't come near, she's still alive. Ethan didn't listen. He placed his hand on the creature's side. The scales were colder than Yasin's, and harder. A pulse beat beneath them, fast, fading. The creature turned its surviving eye toward him, red, cloudy. It held the same thing that was in Grom's eyes, in Yasin's eyes, in the eyes of every animal Ethan had held on the operating table. Pain, fear, and a question. Will you help, or are you like the rest of them? Ethan took off his gloves, stuck them in his pocket, bare hands. He ran his palm over the scales, found the edge of the wound. Grom's tusks had gone deep, torn through the muscle layer, but hadn't reached the intestines. He felt with his fingers, the edges of the wound, ragged, dirty, dirt and shard fragments in the wound, bleeding from a major artery. He pressed down, with both hands, leaning his weight on it. The creature twitched. Its front paw scraped the ground next to his knee. The claws left furrows 10 centimeters from his leg. Ethan didn't move, pressing, holding it, speaking. Quiet, buddy, quiet. I know, it hurts, I know. But you need to lie still. I won't let you go. You hear me? I won't. Lienne appeared beside him. He hadn't heard her approach. She stood there with a bag of herbs and strips of cloth. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, but she stood her ground. She didn't run away. Ethan said, I need the ointment, the one that stops the bleeding, the green jar, quickly. She reached for it. Her hands were shaking, but she got it. She opened it. Ethan held the wound with one hand. With the other, he scooped up the ointment. He pressed it into the wound. The creature twitched again. It let out a howl, but weakly. It didn't have the strength for a full roar. Ethan worked, minute by minute. Ointment, pressure, cloth. Press down, hold. The bleeding slowed after 20 minutes. It stopped after 30. Ethan sat on the ground next to the creature. His hands were black with blood. His shirt no longer had sleeves. Both had been used for the bandage. The creature was breathing, hoarsely, but breathing. Its eye closed. It didn't go out. It closed, asleep or unconscious. Ethan sensed it. No, he didn't sense it. The connection hadn't formed. The creature was alive, but the debt hadn't registered. Ethan thought. The wound was still fatal. He hadn't saved it. He'd postponed it. The connection forms when the threat of death passes. Here, it hadn't passed. The creature could still die. He needed more time, more tools, more of everything. He turned to Lienne, said, "I need to stitch it up." Gestured. Needle, thread. She nodded. Left. Returned 10 minutes later. A bone needle. Thick, rough, thread made of sinew. Ethan looked at it. Looked at the wound as long as his arm. Looked at the needle. Said, "All right, we'll work with what we have." He began to stitch, by the light of the torches held by Bran and 2 hunters. They stood nearby, not because they wanted to help, because they couldn't leave, because they were watching a man without a weapon and without the seal stitch up the creature that 20 minutes ago had tried to devour their village. And the creature lay there, motionless, and the ash hound lay nearby, watching with one eye, and a huge boar stood behind the man like a bodyguard. The world had turned upside down, and none of them knew how to turn it back. Ethan had been sewing for 2 hours. The stitch was rough, uneven, on the ground, in the dark, with a bone needle. Not his best work. But the wound is closed, the edges are pulled together, the bleeding has stopped. He didn't touch the eye. It's seriously damaged, lost, but the eye socket isn't infected. Leave it. Watch it. The creature was breathing more evenly. The pulse beneath the scales had stabilized. Slow, deep. She had regained consciousness once in the past 2 hours, opened her surviving eye, looked at Ethan. He was sitting right above her, his hands elbow deep in blood, his face splattered with black, his eyes red with fatigue. She looked at him. He looked at her. Then she closed her eye. And Ethan felt it, warmth, a familiar warmth in his chest, a life debt registered, a bond established. The third, the creature that had come to kill, that had taken livestock and people, that had been the village's nightmare. She lay at his feet and was his, not because he had won, because he had sewn her up. Ethan sat on the ground. 3 bonds hummed in his chest. Ash, nearby, pain in his ribs, fatigue, but contentment. Thunder behind him, wounds on his sides, heavy fatigue, but calm. And a new one, nameless yet, vast, weak, but alive. And within it, amidst the pain and weakness, something small and unfamiliar, something this creature had never felt before. Gratitude. Lienne sat nearby on the ground. Her hands were covered in blood, too. She had been helping for the last hour, handing him the thread, holding the torch when Bran grew tired, pressing the edges of the wound together while he stitched. She looked at the creature, then at Ethan, then back at the creature. She said quietly, "You're crazy." Ethan replied. "Probably," she said. "What will you call her?" Ethan looked at the creature. 6 paws, black scales, 1 eye. Huge, he said. "Shadow, because she came in the dark, and because now she's my shadow." Lienne smiled slightly. That quick movement of the corner of her lips, Ethan noticed and thought, "Nice smile." Then he thought, "I need to sleep." Then he thought, "I need to check Grom's wounds." Then he thought, "I have 3 monsters. I'm in a medieval world. I'm sitting on the ground in blood. And next to me sits a woman who hasn't screamed once all night. A good night. A strange one, but a good one." In the morning, the villagers came out and saw. The creature that had terrorized them every new moon lay by the gate, stitched up, bandaged, alive. An ash-colored hound lay nearby. Shadowtail stood nearby, with brown patches of dried blood on his flanks, and between them a man slept. A strange man, in tattered clothes, with black hands, with 3 monsters around him, and not a single one of them had touched a single person all night. Bran stood at the gate, watching. Lienne stood nearby. Hunters stood nearby. Peasants stood nearby. The old woman who had crossed herself on the first day crossed herself again. But this time she didn't say witch. She didn't say saint. She didn't say anything. She just stood there and watched. As a man slept among the monsters, and the monsters slept beside the man, and none of it had a single explanation that the world of Arkein could offer. For 3 days after the battle, Ethan didn't get out of bed. He lay in a room at Bran's house. His body refused to work. His hands shook. His legs wouldn't hold him up. Through the bond, he felt all 3 at once, and it was exhausting. Grom's pain in his sides, Shadow's dull, aching pain in his lower abdomen, the itch of Yasin's healing rib. 3 bodies on top of his own, 3 sets of sensations: hunger, thirst, fatigue, all multiplied by 4. Lienne came twice a day. She brought broth. She changed the bandages on his hands. He had torn the skin on his palms while sewing Shadow with a bone needle for 2 hours straight. The blisters had burst. Raw flesh lay beneath them. Lienne silently applied ointment and rebandaged them. Her hands were steady, cool. She asked no questions. She just did it. On the 4th day, Ethan got up. He stepped out onto the porch. The sun hit his eyes. He squinted. Shadow lay at the village gate, huge, black, with one eye. The wound in his lower abdomen was healing, slowly, slower than thunders, slower than ashes. The creature was larger. The injuries were more severe, but it was healing. Ethan approached. He crouched down beside it. Shadow opened its eye. Red, but not dull, bright, alive. It looked at him. Through the bond he sensed recognition, and that tiny spark of gratitude that hadn't faded since the night of the battle. He placed his hand on its snout, scales beneath his fingers, hard, cold, but beneath them a pulse, steady, strong. Shadow closed its eye, not from pain, from peace. Ethan said quietly, "Good morning, patient number 3. The shadow snorted. A stream of warm air shot out of its nostrils. Ethan thought, 3 monsters. They're all snorting at me. Apparently, this is the local equivalent of a dog's lick. The village had changed. Not right away, not entirely, but it had changed. The children had stopped hiding. 2 boys approached Yasin. One held out his hand. Yasin sniffed it, licked it. The boy squealed with delight and ran off. The second stayed. He stood there. He watched. Then he sat down beside her. Yasin rested her head on his lap. The boy froze. He held his breath. Then he gently stroked the hound's neck. Yasin closed her eyes. Ethan watched from around the corner. Through their bond, he could feel it. Yasin liked it. Warm little hands, cautious, without threat. The hound purred, a low, vibrating sound, like a big cat. The boy smiled so that all his baby teeth were visible, Ethan thought. So that's how it works. Not with words, not with proof, just a child and a hound that lets itself be petted. Grom was recovering. The wounds on his flanks had healed within a week. The scars remained. White stripes on dark fur, 4 parallel ones, traces of Shadow's claws. The boar bore them calmly. Ethan examined him every day, listened to his lungs. The wheezing was completely gone. Grom moved with confidence. He ate a lot. Bran set aside a pen for him behind the village. The peasants fed him scraps and rotten vegetables. Grom ate everything, indiscriminately, like a pig, only the size of a horse, and with tusks, and with a tail from which dark smoke swirled, a detail Ethan noticed. The smoke on Grom's tail reacted to his emotions. When the boar was calm, the smoke was thin and transparent. When he's alarmed, it thickens and darkens. When he's angry, it spreads across the ground like fog. Ethan recorded his observations in his head. He had no paper, no pen, everything in his memory. Just like in veterinary school during his first clinical rotations. Memorize, organize, apply. A month passed. Ethan lived in Holmbrook. He worked every day. Cattle, horses, dogs. Once they brought in a cat with a dislocated paw. Ethan said it. The cat bit his finger. Some things are the same in any world. He took payment, copper crowns, sometimes food, sometimes cloth. He saved up. Bran helped him clear out a corner in an empty house by the western wall. A small room, a table, a cot, a hearth. Ethan arranged the clay pots of ointments that Lienne had given him on the table. He laid out his tools, a bone knife, 2 larger knives he'd traded with a blacksmith for treating his mule. Strips of cloth for bandages, needles, threads made from sinew. A small clinic. The first veterinary clinic in the world of Arkein. He looked at it and thought. The only things missing were a sign on the door and the smell of antiseptic. Lienne became his permanent assistant, not by agreement. She just came one morning and stayed until evening. Then she came again the next day, and the next. Within a week, it became the norm. She came after dawn. She brought fresh herbs. They worked together until lunchtime. After lunch, Ethan made his rounds to check on his creatures. Ash, Thunder, Shadow. Shadow was the hardest of all. Huge, six-legged, one-eyed. She lay behind the stockade on the north side of the village. The villagers gave her a wide berth, even after what they'd seen, even knowing she was connected to Ethan, the creature that killed their livestock and their people. Fear doesn't fade in a week. Ethan understood. He didn't pressure them. He came to Shadow himself, changed her bandages, checked the stitches. He talked, in English, in broken local, in a mix of both. Shadow listened. One red eye followed his hands. Through their bond, he sensed how, day by day, something was changing in her. The wildness didn't disappear, the instincts didn't vanish, but a new layer settled over them. Affection. Weak, uncertain, like a wild animal eating from a hand for the first time, unable to believe the hand won't strike. In the 5th week, Ethan examined Lienne's knee for the first time. She didn't ask. He didn't offer. It was just that one evening they were sitting on the porch of his house after a long day. She was rubbing her right knee. The car, out of habit, just as she did every evening. Ethan said, "Let me take a look." She froze, looked at him, for a long time, then slowly stretched out her leg. He knelt down, carefully. He rolled up the hem of her skirt to her knee, no higher. She tensed. He noticed. He worked in silence. His fingers probed the joint. The patella is displaced laterally, medial collateral ligament, weakened, not completely torn, partial tear, chronic, about 8 years ago, healed improperly, scar tissue, restricts mobility, causes pain under stress, he said. "I can't cure this completely, but I can make it better." She was silent. He continued, "I need some fabric, thick, and 2 thin plates, wooden or bone. I'll make what we call a brace, joint immobilization. It keeps the knee from shifting sideways, takes the strain off the ligament. In a few months, the pain will lessen. It might go away completely." Lienne looked at him, gray eyes, quiet, deep. She said, "The local doctor said it's permanent," Ethan replied. "The local doctor doesn't know what a brace is." She was silent. Then she said, "All right, give it a try." He nodded, stood up, removed his hands, and noticed that she didn't pull her skirt down right away. A second, maybe 2. Then she pulled it down, quickly. She looked away. Ethan said nothing, but he remembered. He made the brace in 3 days. Thick fabric, 2 bone plates he carved from deer ribs, leather straps, rough, ugly, but functional. Lienne put it on, walked around a bit, stopped, took another step, one more, turned to face him. Something strange on her face, not a smile, not surprise, something in between. She said, "It doesn't hurt," Ethan replied. "Wait, wear them for a week, then tell me." She wore them, a week, 2, a month. The limp lessened. It didn't disappear, but her step became steadier, more confident. She walked more, further. She'd go out to gather herbs all day. She'd come back without that usual weariness on her face. She never once said thank you. But every morning, a pot of fresh ointment would appear on his doorstep, or a bundle of herbs, or a bowl of broth. Ethan didn't comment. He accepted it. He worked. In the evenings, they sat on the porch. They were silent. Sometimes they spoke, about herbs, about wounds, about the creatures, nothing personal, nothing about the past. Quiet, grown-up evenings for 2 people who knew the value of silence. Rumors were spreading. Ethan knew it. He could feel it. The village couldn't keep a secret. A strange man with 3 creatures without the mark. The creature that used to come every new moon now lies by the gate and lets him change the bandage. Bran had warned him. Merchants come. They see. They leave. They tell. Every inn from Holmbrook to the Baron's castle already knows. A man without the mark leads the creatures. Ethan listened, nodded, understood that this was a problem, but he didn't know what to do about it. He couldn't hide 3 monsters. One shadow was the size of a house. He couldn't stop healing them. It was the only thing he knew how to do. The only thing that gave him meaning in a world where he had nothing. No family, no papers, no understanding of who he was or why he was here. Just his hands, just his skill. Just 3 creatures who followed him because he hadn't let them die. They brought the wyvern hatchling in the 6th week, a boy. The very one Jason had been petting. He ran up in the morning, screaming. He tugged at Ethan's arm. "Lead the way, quickly, over there, in the forest." Ethan followed him. Jason ran alongside. After half an hour's walk, they came out into a clearing. Ethan stopped. The chick was lying on the ground, the size of a large turkey. Its wings were leathery, like a bat's, no feathers. Instead, soft, rust-colored down. A long neck. A small head with a beak that had teeth. A toothed beak. A thin, long tail. The chick wasn't moving. It lay on its side. One wing was twisted at an odd angle. It was breathing shallowly and rapidly. Ethan crouched down. He examined it. A broken wing. The humerus. Closed fracture. No displacement. Lucky break. Dehydration. Sunken eyes. Dry mucous membranes. The chick hadn't eaten for at least 2 days. Maybe 3. No one around. No mother. No nest. Abandoned. Or the mother had died, or flown away. Ethan picked up the chick. It chirped, weakly, tried to peck, didn't have the strength. Ethan pressed it to his chest. Warm, light, bones like sticks. You could feel its ribs through the down. Exhaustion. Another day and the chick wouldn't have survived. He brought it to the village, placed it on the table in his room. Lienne came in 10 minutes later, looked at it, said one word, wyvern. Ethan nodded. He'd already heard that word from Bran. Wyverns. Flying creatures. 3rd or 4th rank, depending on the species. Dangerous. Fast. Adults breathe fire. This one was a youngling. Small. Hungry. With a broken wing. Ethan got to work. A splint for the wing made of 2 straight branches and strips of cloth. The fixation was firm, but not too tight. Don't restrict blood flow. The wing is immobilized. Then food. Broth. Small pieces of meat. At first, the chick turned away. Then it caught the scent, opened its beak. Ethan put a piece in. The chick swallowed. Another one. More. 20 minutes later, it had eaten so much its belly was swollen. Ethan stopped. Enough. Too much at once is dangerous for an emaciated body. Small portions, every 2 hours. The chick looked at him. Amber eyes. Large, round, like an owl's. Then it curled up on the table. It rested its head under its healthy wing. It fell asleep. The bond formed on the 3rd day, when Ethan removed the splint to check how the bone was healing. The chick was lying on his lap, calm, trusting. Ethan felt the fracture site. A callus was forming. It was healing properly. He put the splint back on, and a warmth flared in his chest. The 4th, a life bond registered, a connection established. The chick raised its head, looked at Ethan, squeaked. And through the connection, Ethan felt it. Warmth, fullness, safety. A tiny creature that, for the first time in its short life, was warm, safe, with food in its belly, and next to someone who wasn't trying to kill it. Ethan said, "I'll call you Spark, because you're small, and because one day you'll breathe fire." Spark chirped and tried to climb into his chest. Ethan let it. A warm lump settled under his shirt. A quiet, contented purr through the bond. 4 creatures, 4 bonds, 4 sets of sensations in his head. Ethan thought he'd soon need a bigger head. Mira appeared in the 8th week. Ethan was standing by the well when he saw them. 2 of them, walking down the road toward the village. A girl of about 17, skinny, ragged. Her black hair was tangled. She was pulling a boy of about 7 by the hand, her younger brother. Ethan realized this immediately from the way she held him, tightly, without letting go, the way a person holds on to the only thing they have left. They approached the gate. The girl looked at Ethan, at Yesen, who was lying nearby, at the shadow behind the stockade. The boy hid behind his sister. The girl didn't hide. She stood there. She looked. Her eyes were dark, large. In them, hunger and exhaustion and something else, stubbornness. Ethan said, "You're hungry." Not a question, a statement. The girl nodded. He led them into the house, gave them food, bread, broth, meat. The boy ate so fast he choked. The girl ate slowly, watching her brother, watching Ethan, watching the door, ready to run at any moment. Her name was Mira Song. Her brother's name was Theo. Orphans. The village where they lived had been destroyed by the creatures from the rift a month ago. They had been walking ever since, on foot, through the forest, without food, without direction, just walking, because stopping meant dying. Mira told this briefly, dryly. No tears. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said, "You can stay." Mira looked at him. For a long time. Then she said, "How will I pay?" Ethan replied, "I need help. I'm short-handed. She can help with the creatures, with cleaning." "With anything," Mira said. "I'm not afraid of the creatures." Ethan looked at her. She wasn't lying. There was no fear in her eyes. There was anger, quiet, deep, anger at the creatures that had killed her family. But no fear, Ethan thought. The anger will pass. Or maybe it won't. But right now, the main thing is that she and the boy were fed and safe. The rest could wait. Mira stayed. Theo stayed. 3 days later, Mira began to help. A week later, she became the third pair of hands in the makeshift clinic. Ethan was surprised. The girl worked silently, quickly. She wasn't afraid of blood. She wasn't afraid of the creatures. When Ethan changed the bandage on Theo's side, Mira stood beside him, holding the jar of ointment. Shadow didn't react to her. A one-eyed creature the size of a house and a 17-year-old girl stood side by side, and neither of them flinched. Ethan noticed something else. Yasin. The hound accepted Mira instantly. That very first evening, Mira sat by the fire. Yasin approached. She lay down beside her. Mira reached out her hand. Yasin nuzzled her nose into her. Mira hugged the hound around the neck. Yasin didn't pull away. Through the bond, Ethan felt it. Warmth. Soft, maternal warmth. The third month began with a discovery. Ethan was walking through the forest west of Holmbrook. He was looking for a place to let Shadow run free. The creature was growing stronger. The wound had completely. The scar on her lower belly had turned white and become firm. Shadow was moving. A lot. Restlessly. She needed space. The village was too small for a creature of that size. Ethan was walking along an animal trail by the stream when he saw the mill. Abandoned. Stone walls. A wooden roof half collapsed. The water wheel stood still. The stream flowed past but didn't turn it. The blades had rotted away. Around the mill was a ravine. Wide, deep, overgrown with ferns and blackberries. Ethan stood at the edge of the ravine and looked. The mill. The walls were intact. The roof could be repaired. The ravine served as a natural fence. The stream was nearby. Forest all around. A half-hour walk to the village. Close enough not to lose contact with Holmbrook. Far enough that the shadow wouldn't frighten the villagers, he thought. A home. Bran had no objections. The mill had stood empty for 10 years. The old miller had died. There were no heirs. The village made no claim to it. Ethan could take it. Bran even helped. He sent 2 men with tools, 3 days of work. They patched the roof. They hung a door. They boarded up the windows. They cleaned the inside. They hauled out the rotten grain. They drove out the rats. Ethan set up his simple belongings, a workbench, tools, jars of ointments, benches along the walls. The hearth was lit. The chimney drew well. Lienne brought herbs. She hung them in bunches on the walls. 2 days later, the mill smelled of pine needles and mint. A week later, it smelled like home. The ravine became the creature's territory. Shadow took the widest part. She lay down, stretched out, 6 paws spread wide. Her tail hung off the edge of a rock. One red eye watched the sky. Thunder settled at the far end under an overhanging rock. A dark corner. Quiet. The boar loved the shade and the peace. Yasin shuttled back and forth between the mill and the ravine. Back and forth, checking the perimeter, like a dog guarding a yard. Iskra lived inside the mill. He slept on a beam under the ceiling. His wing had healed. Ethan had removed the cast 2 weeks ago. The fledgling began to spread his wings. He tried. Short jumps from the table to the floor, from the beam to the table. He wasn't flying yet, but he was trying, every day. Mira moved into the mill with Theo. Ethan didn't invite her. She came on her own, with her brother, with a bundle containing all their belongings. 2 shirts, a blanket, a wooden spoon. She set the bundle in the corner. She looked at Ethan. He nodded. She stayed. Theo settled on a cot by the wall. Ash lay down next to him. The boy hugged the hound and fell asleep. It became a ritual, every evening. Mira lay down on the cot next to him. Ethan on his own. Yasin between the children. Iskra on the beam. Beyond the mill walls, Grom and Tenny. 4 walls, 4 beasts, 3 people. Something resembling a family, or the beginning of a family. The work never stopped. Peasants from Holmbrook continued to bring livestock. Now Ethan received them at the mill. The examination table, shelves with tools. Lienne came every morning. Mira assisted. Ethan taught her. Seriously. For real. Just like they teach students. He showed her how to feel a horse's pulse in the neck, how to determine dehydration by looking at the mucous membranes, how to clean a wound, how to apply a suture. Mira soaked it all in, silently, quickly. In 2 weeks, she could treat a simple wound on her own. In a month, she was setting splints. Ethan told her one evening, "In 2 years, you'll be doing this better than me. Warm Ravine needs a second vet." Mira froze. She looked at him. He wasn't joking, she could tell. Her lips trembled. She turned away. She went behind the mill. Ethan could hear her through the thin walls. She was crying. Not out of grief, because for the first time in her life, someone had told her she was needed, that she was valuable, that she had a future. Ethan sat by the hearth and said nothing. Yasin laid her head on his lap. A quiet, warm sympathy flowed through the connection. Warm Ravine. The name came on its own. Ethan didn't make it up. One of the peasants said it. "I'm going to Warm Ravine to see the animal doctor." It stuck. It caught on. A week later, everyone was calling it that. Warm Ravine. A mill in a ravine with a stream, where a strange man lives with 4 creatures without the mark, where you can bring a sick cow and have it cured for a copper coin, where the ash-colored hound lets the children pet him, where a huge black creature with 1 eye lies in the ravine and doesn't bother anyone. Tepli Ovraj. Home. Seraphina arrived at the end of the 3rd month. Ethan remembered that day. A cloudy morning, light rain. He was changing the bandage on the paw of a dog brought in by a farmer from a neighboring farmstead. Lienne stood nearby. Mira was holding the dog. The mill door opened. A girl stood in the doorway, young, about 19, slender, pale. Dark hair cut short, unevenly, as if cut with a knife in a hurry. Her clothes. Ethan looked closer. The remnants of something white and austere. A habit, torn, dirty, barefoot, her feet covered in mud and scrapes. She stood in the doorway, trembling, not from the cold, from exhaustion. Her last reserves of strength had gone into making it this far. She said 1 word, "Help," and fell. Ethan caught her before she hit the floor. Light. Too light. He carried her to a cot, examined her. Exhaustion, dehydration, feet rubbed raw and bleeding. Infection in 2 cuts on her leg. High fever. She was burning up. He worked. Lienne was by his side. They washed the wounds, applied ointments, bandaged her legs, gave her a sip of water, covered her up. The girl slept for 2 days. She woke up only to drink. She was delirious, speaking a language Ethan didn't know. Not the local one, another, an old one, a dead one. Seraphina woke up on the 3rd day. She sat up on the cot. She looked around. She saw the mill, tools on the walls, bundles of herbs, a hearth. Miru, who was cutting bandages at the table. Theo, who was sitting in the corner, whittling a wooden figurine. Yasin, who was lying by the door. Seraphina looked at the hound, then at Ethan. He was sitting across from her on a stool, waiting. She said, "You're the one, the man without the seal." Ethan paused. Then he replied, "I'm the one." She closed her eyes. She said, "I'm Seraphina Villard, the Grand Inquisitor's niece. I ran away. They killed the village, all of it, because a man lived there with a creature without the mark. 32 people, children, everyone." She opened her eyes, dry, without tears, empty. She said, "I saw it. I stood and watched, and then I ran." Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he stood up. He walked over to the hearth. He poured broth into our bowl, brought it over, placed it on her lap. He said, "Eat first, then you'll tell me." Seraphina took the bowl. Her hands were shaking. She took a sip, then another. Then she looked at Ethan, and something appeared in her empty eyes. Not gratitude, not relief. A question. The same question Yasin had, Grom had, Tenny had, Iskra had. Every creature he'd kept on the edge had. "Will you help, or are you like everyone else?" Ethan said, "You're safe, here, now." Seraphina took another sip. She said nothing, but she didn't leave. That was her answer. Seraphina was silent for the first week. She ate, she slept. She let Lienne change the bandages on her legs. She didn't speak. She sat on the lounge chair and stared at the wall. Ethan didn't touch her, didn't ask questions, didn't try to comfort her. He'd seen this before, not in people, in animals. Shock, deep, total. When the body shuts down everything unnecessary and leaves only basic functions, breathing, eating, sleeping, everything else later. When the brain is ready to remember without breaking down. Mira kept her distance. She felt she needed space. Theo didn't keep his distance. He simply sat down next to her and carved his wooden figures, silently, without looking at her, just there, a living presence, breathing, warmth. Seraphina didn't shoo him away. On the 4th day, her hand rested on the boy's head. For a second, then she took it away. But Ethan saw. The ice was cracking. On the 8th day, she spoke. Ethan was sitting at the table, sharpening a knife. Seraphina said, 32. Ethan didn't look up. He waited. She continued, 32 people, 7 children. The youngest was 3 years old. The Inquisition arrived at dawn. They surrounded the village. They gave them an hour to hand over the man with the creature. The village didn't hand him over. Not because they were heroes, because the man had left 2 days earlier. But the Inquisition didn't believe them. They began searching the houses. They found the creature, a small one, the size of a cat, harmless. It lived with an old man who fed it scraps. No seal, no connection, just a creature that had attached itself to a human, Albrecht, my uncle. He ordered the house burned down, with the old man inside. The village tried to intervene. He ordered them to clear the area. Seraphina fell silent. She was breathing, evenly, too evenly, control, ironclad, drilled in by years of discipline in the light circle. Then she continued. I stood in formation, like a novice, like part of the Inquisition, and I watched. When the 3rd house caught fire, I ran. Not because I was brave, because my legs started running before I realized what I was doing. Ethan set the knife down. He looked at her. Seraphina sat upright, back straight, hands on her knees, face impassive. Only her eyes were alive, dark, burning. He said, "It's not your fault." She flinched, as if struck. She said sharply, "I stood and watched," Ethan replied. "And then you ran." She said. "Too late," he replied. "You're here." She was silent. He continued. "I had a colleague in my world. He was a priest before he started working with animals. He said, God isn't about rules, not about rituals, not about hierarchy. It's about someone bandaging your wound." Ethan pointed to her bandaged legs. Seraphina looked at the bandages, then at him, and she cried. Quietly, soundlessly. Tears streamed down her motionless face. She didn't wipe them away. She didn't look away. She just sat there and cried, for the first time in 10 years. Ethan didn't move. He didn't comfort her. He didn't hug her. He just sat beside her.
Through their bond, he sensed Yasin behind the door lift her head. She felt someone else's pain, human pain, not animal pain, but pain. The hound whimpered softly. Seraphina stayed, not as a patient, as part of Warm Ravine. She started working 2 weeks later, not with animals, with papers. She read, in 4 languages, 3 of them dead. Bran brought old scrolls from the village that had been stored in the basement of the community house. No one could read them. Seraphina could. She sat by the mill window and read. Slowly, carefully. She translated for Ethan. The laws of the barony, maps of the surrounding area, lists of creatures by rank, descriptions of the rifts. Ethan listened and memorized. The world of Arkein was taking on structure, a system, logic. 6 ranks of creatures, from small hounds to colossi. Fault lines open on the new moon. The Church of the Bright Circle controls the seals. The nobility controls the armies. The peasants control nothing. A balance of power.
Fragile, ancient. And Ethan, by his very existence, was breaking it. The 4th month. Warm Ravine was growing. A family of refugees arrived from the south. Father, mother, 2 children. Their village was flooded after a creature from the rift destroyed the dam on the river. Nowhere to live, nowhere to go. Bran sent them to Ethan. Ethan took them in. The man knew how to work with wood. He began to truly repair the mill, the roof, the walls. He built a shed for the livestock. Then an old man came, alone, with a sack of grain on his back. A former farmer. His land had been taken by the Baron for debts. He walked wherever his eyes took him. He'd heard about Warm Ravine, about a place where no one was chased away. Ethan took him in. Then a woman came with 3 children. Then 2 guys from the Hunters Guild who'd been kicked out for refusing to go on a job they considered suicidal. Then another family, and more. By the end of the 4th month, 22 people were living in Warm Ravine. The mill became the center. Tents sprang up around it, then huts, then something resembling courtyards with pens, a small settlement in the ravine, with its own veterinarian, with its own herbalist, with its own learned theologian, and with 4 creatures guarding the perimeter. The shadow became the guardian. Ethan hadn't planned it that way. The creature took up the position on its own. Every night it circled the ravine. 6 paws stepped silently on the stones. 1 red eye scanned the darkness. Nothing came to Warm Ravine at night. Not small hounds, not wolves, not large beasts from the forest. The shadow was too big, too dangerous, too obvious. Its presence was a wall, invisible but impassable. Ethan sensed it through the bond. The shadow wasn't guarding the territory, it was guarding him, the people around him, the beasts around him, everything that belonged to the man who had stitched up her belly. It wasn't obedience, not an order, a choice, voluntary, conscious. The beast that had hunted humans a year ago now guarded a human settlement, because one man, once, had not let her die. The 5th month, the 6th creature. Ethan found her in the forest. He was returning from Holmbrook. He heard a sound, a thin one, a high-pitched one, not a scream, a whimper, a small one, a plaintive one. He followed the sound, into the bushes. A creature, small, about the size of a fox, covered in fur, not scales, silvery fur, 4 paws, long ears, a fluffy tail, forked at the end. Both ends of the tail moved independently. The creature lay in a pit. Its hind paw was trapped between the rocks. A trap, a hunting trap. The rocks were stacked so that the animal would fall in and be unable to escape. Ethan climbed down. The creature growled, weakly. It bared its teeth, small, sharp. He crouched down. He spoke. The creature froze. He carefully moved the stones aside, freed the paw, dislocated, not broken. Set it. The creature squeaked, then licked his hand, warmth in his chest. The 5th bond. Ethan lifted the creature into his arms. Light, warm, soft fur. She snuggled up to him and closed her eyes. He carried her to Warm Ravine. Mira saw her and gasped. Silvery, fluffy, with a forked tail. Beautiful. Mira asked, "What will you name her?" Ethan looked at the creature. He said, "Luna, because she's silvery and because I found her at night." Mira took Luna in her arms. The creature didn't resist. A minute later, Luna was sleeping on Mira's lap.
An hour later, Mira declared that Luna would sleep with her. Ethan didn't object. Hana came at night. Ethan woke up when Yasin raised her head. A short pulse through the link. An outsider, nearby. Not a creature, a human. He stood up. He walked out of the mill. It was dark. The moon was thin. Clouds. Yasin stood by the door. Her fur bristled. But she wasn't growling, so no threat, just a stranger. Ethan peered into the darkness. A figure stood at the edge of the ravine. A woman. She froze when she saw him. Ethan said, "Who are you?" Silence. Then a voice. Hoarse. Quiet. "I was told they don't hunt here." He stepped closer. The woman stood motionless. Tall. Thin. Dark hair. One arm pressed to her chest. The other hangs by her side. It hangs wrong. Ethan could see it even in the dark. The arm is broken. Forearm. The bone was displaced. A swelling. Bruises from shoulder to wrist. He said, "Go inside." Hana Cho, 22 years old, a noblewoman's daughter. He found that out later. First he noticed the fracture, the middle third of the radius, a displacement, closed, but the edges of the bone could be felt through the skin, fresh, 2 days, maybe 3, untreated. Bruises on the arm, bruises on the neck, bruises on the ribs. Ethan examined her in silence. Lienne stood nearby, holding the lamp. Hana sat on the cot. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't crying. Her face was like a mask. Her eyes were dry, dark. They were fixed on a spot on the wall behind his shoulder. Not at him, past him. Ethan worked. He removed her outer clothing. Carefully, without touching her unnecessarily. He explained every movement in advance. "Now I'm going to pull the sleeve off. Now I'm going to touch here. This will hurt." She nodded, silently. She didn't flinch, not even when he set the bone. A crack, wet, quiet. The bone snapped back into place. Hana didn't make a sound. Only the knuckles of her good hand, with which she was clutching the edge of the cot, turned white. He applied a splint, a tight one, a secure one. He wrapped it with bandages. He checked her fingers. Sensation was present. Circulation was fine. Nails were pink. Pulse at the wrist was steady. He examined the ribs. Fractures. 2. Maybe 3. No displacement. To bandage or not. In his world, opinions differed. Here, he decided to bandage. He wrapped the rib cage with strips of fabric, tightly, not too tight. Don't restrict breathing. Hana let him do whatever, silently, with the same stony face. When he finished, she looked at him, for the first time, directly. Eyes, dark, angry. Not at him, at the world, at everything that had brought her here at night with a broken arm and bruises on her neck. She said, "Thank you." Her voice was even, emotionless. Ethan replied, "I'll check it tomorrow. Sleep now." Lienne made her a bed on the empty lounge chair. Hana lay down. With her good arm, she pulled the blanket up to her chin. She closed her eyes. She wasn't asleep. Ethan could tell. Her breathing was too steady. Her shoulders were too tense. But she was lying there, in the warmth, behind walls, with a lock on the door and a creature the size of a house outside. Maybe for the first time in a long time, she was lying where no one could reach her. In the morning, Ethan learned the story, not from Hana, from Seraphina. Seraphina knew Cho's name, a minor noble house, bankrupt 5 years ago. The land sold. The title was formally preserved, but without money, a title is just an empty sound. Hana was married off to Baron Werner, the very same baron on whose lands Holmbrook stood. A political marriage, an old debt. Hana was the payment. Seraphina told this calmly, matter-of-factly, without comment. Ethan listened. Then he looked at Hana, who was sitting by the wall, eating bread, with her left hand. Her right was in a splint, a silver hairpin in her hair, the only valuable thing she had on her. She had run away from the Baron, with a broken arm, at night, alone, through the forest. And she made it to Warm Ravine because someone at the roadside inn had told her they don't chase people here. Ethan didn't come within 2 steps of her, on purpose. He'd seen how she reacted when anyone approached. Her back would stiffen,
Her shoulders would rise. Her good arm would involuntarily clench into a fist, a reflex, ingrained. He'd seen it in shelter dogs, the ones that had been beaten.
Every approach was a potential blow. Every outstretched hand was potential pain. Ethan kept his distance. He spoke calmly. He warned her before every touch. When he changed the splint on her arm, he explained every movement. I'm going to untie the bandage now. I'm going to check your pulse now. I'm going to tighten it now. It'll be tight, but it won't hurt. Hana let him, silently, with a stony face. But after a week, Ethan noticed. Her shoulders were slightly lower. Her back was slightly less tense. After 2 weeks, she was sitting at the communal table. She didn't speak. She ate. She listened. She observed. A month later, she said something for the first time at dinner. "This broth is disgusting." Mira took offense. Lienne smirked. Ethan hid his smile. Sarcasm. So she was thawing. Hana knew how to shoot a crossbow. Ethan found this out by accident. He saw her examining an old crossbow that one of the hunters had brought to Warm Ravine. He said, "You know how?" She looked at him. She took the crossbow in her good arm, raised it, aimed, with one arm, with cracked ribs. She fired. The bolt embedded itself in a tree 30 paces away, right in the center of the knot she was aiming at. Ethan said, "Good." She replied, "The only useful thing my father ever taught me." Ethan nodded. From then on, the crossbow became her thing. She cleaned it in the evenings, with her good arm. Then she started training, every day. When her arm had healed after 2 months, she shot with both hands, and with such accuracy that the hunters in Warm Ravine stopped arguing with her about anything. The 6th month. Warm Ravine had grown to 30 people, 6 bound creatures: Ash, Thunder, Shadow, Spark, Moon, and the 6th, a wounded wolfhound that Ethan found by the road with a broken spine. A 3-hour operation. Lienne and Mira assisted. Seraphina held the lamp. Hana stood by the door with a crossbow. Why? In case anyone came. Ethan fused the spine using bone plates and sinew. The wolfhound survived. His hind legs worked. Not perfectly. He dragged his left one slightly. But he walked. He ran. He lived. A bond was formed. The 6th. Ethan named him lame. Mira said that was rude. Ethan replied that it was honest. Lame wagged his forked tail and had no opinion on the matter. The first skirmish with the Inquisition occurred at the end of the 6th month. Ethan was standing at the entrance to the mill when he saw them. Horsemen. 5 of them. In white cloaks with a golden circle on their backs. The symbol of the light circle. They rode up to the edge of the ravine, stopped. Ethan went out to meet them. Alone. Unarmed. Jason stood behind him. A shadow raised its head in the ravine. A single red eye watched the horsemen. The horses twitched. They sensed it. The lead horseman removed his hood. Young. Around 30. A smooth face. Cold eyes. He introduced himself. An inquisitor of the 3rd rank. Ethan didn't remember his name. It didn't matter. The inquisitor said, "You are keeping creatures without the seal of subjugation. This is a violation of the canon of the Bright Circle. Paragraph 7, Section 3. All creatures are subject to confiscation or destruction. You are ordered to report to the nearest office for questioning." Ethan stood there. He listened. Then he said, "No." The inquisitor blinked. He was clearly not used to that answer. Ethan continued, "My patients aren't going anywhere, and neither am I. If you have questions, you can ask them here, right now. I'll answer any of them." The inquisitor was silent. His horse shifted from foot to foot. A shadow in the ravine slowly rose. It stood on all 6 paws. It stretched its body. Standing at full height, it was taller than the rider on the horse. One red eye did not blink. The inquisitor looked at the creature, then at Ethan, then back at the creature. His face did not change, but Ethan saw it. His Adam's apple twitched. He swallowed. The inquisitor turned his horse around. He said, "We'll be back." He rode off. The 5 men in white cloaks disappeared behind the hill. Ethan stood at the entrance to the mill, hands in his pockets. Through the bond, he sensed the shadow, satisfaction, deafening, dark. The creature that once hunted humans had just scared off the Inquisition with a single glance. Ethan thought, "They'll be back."
Bran was right. They came, and they'll be back. And next time, there won't be 5 of them. That evening, Hana approached him. She stood beside him. She watched the sunset. Then she said, "My husband, Baron Werner. He is a vassal of House Vellard." Ethan turned to her. She continued, "The Inquisition won't send 5 men next time. The Inquisition will send the Baron, with his knights, with his hounds, with his familiars, because these are his lands, and you're on them." Ethan was silent. Hana said, "I know how he fights. I know his people, his weaknesses, his habits, his fears." A pause. She looked at Ethan, directly, without a stony mask. "For the first time in 2 months," she said, "I won't give up this place, and I won't go back to him." Ethan looked at her, thin, with scars beneath her clothes, with a silver hairpin in her hair, with a crossbow on her shoulder, broken, but not defeated. He said, "We won't give it up." Hana nodded, turned away. She walked toward the mill, stopped after 3 steps. Without turning around, she said, "Thanks for the hand." Ethan replied, "It hasn't fully healed yet. Come back tomorrow for a checkup." Hana snorted, quietly, almost a laugh. She left. Ethan stood and watched the sunset. 6 creatures on the link, 6 dots in his chest, 30 people behind the mill's walls, the Inquisition on the horizon, the Baron somewhere nearby, the church somewhere far away, and him, a veterinary assistant from Portland, with a torch and gloves, against the world, he thought. I need more hands, more walls, more creatures, more of everything. But first, he had to survive what was coming. Evelyn Hartwood had come to kill. Ethan found that out later. At that moment, he saw only a woman. Tall, broad-shouldered, a scar across her left eyebrow, dark, closely cropped hair, a man's doublet worn at the elbows, a sword at her belt, a knife on her hip. She stood at the edge of the ravine and looked down, at Shadow, who lay on the rocks, at Thunder, who was chewing a turnip in the pen, at Ash, who slept by the mill wall, at Spark, who sat on the roof and spread his wings, at Moon, who curled up on her knees beside Mira, at Lame, who hobbled along the stream. 6 creatures, without chains, without seals, without cages, free. Evelyn stood and watched, hand on the hilt of her sword. Ethan came out of the mill. He saw her. He approached. He said, "You're with me." She looked at him, eyes gray-green, hard, without warmth. She said, "I'm the captain of the Hunters Guild, former captain. I was paid to come and kill the charlatan who leads creatures without seals." Ethan blinked. Then he said, "So what have you decided?" She didn't answer. She looked at the mill, at the people inside, at the children running between the huts, at Theo, who was sitting astride Thunder and dangling his legs. The boy was sitting on the back of a second-rank shadow tail. The boar stood motionless, patiently. Its tail, wrapped in smoke, coiled around its leg. Theo patted its neck and laughed. Evelyn watched, for a long time. Then a sound came from the mill, quiet, melodic. Ethan was singing. No, not Ethan. Iskra. The wyvern hatchling sat on a beam and made a strange sound, something between a bird's trill and a purr. Ethan stood below, stitching up a wound on the goat's leg. Iskra sang. The goat lay still, eyes half closed. Ethan sewed and hummed something softly, in English, a song, a children's song, the one he used to sing to the animals in the operating room in Portland. Evelyn took her hand off the sword. She said, "Show me." Ethan looked up. She was standing in the doorway. She repeated, "Show me how you do it." He nodded. He said, "Sit down, watch." She sat down. She watched, all day, as he stitched up the goat, how he changes the bandage on Lame's paw, how he checks the suture on Spark's wing, how he talks to Shadow, quietly, calmly. He places his palm on the scales. The creature, the size of a house, closes its single eye and purrs, low, deeply, like distant thunder. Evelyn sat in the corner of the mill. She was silent. By evening, she laid her sword on the table. She said, "I won't kill anyone." Ethan replied, "All right." She said, "But I have nowhere to go." He replied, "There's a place here." She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. She told the story of her band a week later, in the evening, by the fire. Ethan sat beside her, Lienne across from them. Hana was sharpening bolts for her crossbow. Seraphina was reading a scroll by the light of the fire. Mira and Theo were sleeping in the mill. Evelyn spoke, staring into the fire. 12 people, her squad. The best hunters in the Northern Forges Guild. A contract from a nobleman. Clear out a 3rd-level rift. Go in. Kill everything that moves. Exit. Standard procedure. Only the nobleman didn't say the fissure was 4th level, not 3rd, 4th. The difference is like that between a house cat and a tiger. 12 of them went in. She came out alone. 11 people, her friends, her family, lying in the fissure, because the nobleman wanted to save money on reconnaissance and sent the hunters into a meat grinder. Evelyn fell silent. The fire crackled. Ethan was silent. Then he said, "If you hadn't survived, who would be guarding these children now?" She looked at him. He continued, "Your guys are dead. That can't be changed. But you're here, and there are 30 people here who need someone who knows how to wield a sword. Don't betray your boys. Don't give up on life." Evelyn looked at him. Her eyes were shining. Fire or tears. She didn't let on. She turned away. She stood up. She walked off into the darkness. In the morning, she came out at dawn with a sword and began teaching 2 guys from the Hunters Guild how to hold a sword properly. Ethan drank broth on the porch and watched. He thought, "Here is my right hand. Finally." Yuna Park showed up 2 weeks later. She didn't just come. She arrived in a cart. In the cart was an anvil, a hammer, 3 sacks of coal, a bundle of iron rods, and a blacksmith's bellows. Yuna jumped down from the cart, short, sturdy, hands covered in burns and calluses, a round face, tanned, hair tied back with a leather strap. She surveyed the mill, the ravine, creatures, people. Then she approached Ethan. She said, "I heard you have creatures with scales. I'm a blacksmith. The scales of these creatures are the best material for armor. You give me the scales. I'll forge whatever you need." Ethan looked at her, then at Shadow. The creature was shedding. Every few days, the scales peeled off and fell onto the rocks. Black, hard, like obsidian. Ethan collected them. He didn't know why. Now he knew. He said, "I need tools, surgical ones, knives, needles, clamps. You can make them." Yuna picked up one of Shadow's scales. She turned it over, looked at it in the light, bent it. It wouldn't bend. Tried to snap it. It wouldn't snap. Her eyes lit up. She said, "From this material, I will make you tools that will outlive you and your grandchildren." Ethan replied, "Good. One condition. Every tool will be signed, with your name." Yuna froze. She looked at him. He repeated, "The work of Master Yuna Park, on every knife, on every needle." Yuna was silent. Then she said, "Why?" He replied, "Because you're the one making them. Not your brother, not your guild. You." Yuna turned away, quickly, but he managed to see the moist glint in her eyes. A second later, she was already busily inspecting the spot for the forge. She was directing 2 guys on where to place the anvil. Her voice was steady. Her hands didn't tremble. Only her ears turned red. The 7th month. Warm Ravine had become a real settlement. 35 people, 6 beasts, a smithy, a clinic, a vegetable garden, cattle pens, a palisade along the perimeter that they built every day. Evelyn commanded the defense. Hana was in charge of reconnaissance. Yuna forged. Seraphina planned. Lienne treated. Mira studied. Ethan did everything else. He examined the creatures. He treated people and livestock. He settled disputes. He distributed food. He planned. He thought. He slept for 4 hours. Through the link, The 6 creatures hummed in his mind as a constant background noise. He had gotten used to it, or almost used to it. Sometimes at night, when everyone was asleep, he would sit on the porch of the mill and just listen. 6 points of life, 6 breaths, 6 hearts, and his own. The 7th, the smallest and the most weary. Lienne would come out to him on nights like these. She'd sit down beside him. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer comfort. She just sat there. Sometimes her shoulder brushed against his, light, warm. He didn't move. She didn't move. Quiet nights on the mill porch. 2 adults who knew that words weren't needed. The 8th month, neighboring villages began sending people. Not refugees, envoys, homebrew. 2 villages to the south, 1 to the west. They asked, not for food, not for money, for protection. The creature from the rift no longer came to Holmbrook. The shadow stood guard. But the creatures came to the other villages every new moon. The Baron offered no help. His knights sat in the castle. The church offered no help. Its familiars guarded cathedrals, not peasants. The villages were on their own. Ethan listened to the envoys. He thought. He had 6 creatures, 35 people, 1 smithy, 1 ravine. He couldn't defend 4 villages at once. He said, "I'll think about it." The messengers left. Ethan sat down at the table. Seraphina was beside him. Hana was beside him. Evelyn was beside him. The 4 of them. They thought. Hana said, "We need people." Evelyn said, "We need weapons." Seraphina said, "We need knowledge." Ethan said, "We need time, which we don't have." The 9th month. Seraphina found the manuscript. Ethan remembered that evening. Rain pounded on the mill's roof. Everyone was inside. Seraphina sat by the window with a dim lamp and a stack of scrolls that Bran had found in the basement of an old chapel on the outskirts of Holmbrook. The chapel had been closed 20 years ago. The scrolls had been lying in a chest. Mold, dampness, half of them were illegible. Seraphina had been sorting through them for 3 days, and on the 3rd evening, she froze. Ethan sensed it before he saw it. Silence. Seraphina stopped breathing. Then she slowly raised her head. She looked at him. Her face was white, her eyes wide open. She said, "Ethan, come here." He approached. The scroll was old, very old. The parchment had yellowed and become as brittle as a leaf. The ink had faded to a pale brown, a dead language. The second of the 4 Seraphina knew. She translated slowly, running her finger along the lines. And every word fell into the silence of the mill like a stone into water. 800 years ago, the great rift opened for the first time. Beasts poured out of the other world by the thousands. The world of Arkein stood on the brink of destruction. And then a man appeared, not of this world, one who had come from another place. The scroll called him the first healer, not the executioner, the healer. He did not kill the creatures. He healed them. He found the wounded, the dying, the hunted. He saved them, and they followed him, hundreds, thousands, an army of beings who followed the man not because he forced them to, because he didn't let them die. The first healer led them to the rift, and led them back to the other side, not by force, by a call. They followed him because he led the way. He entered the rift with them, and the rift closed. Seraphina paused. She looked at Ethan. He stood motionless. She continued. After the rift closed, the church rewrote history. The healer became the executioner. The bond became the seal. Salvation became murder. A simple substitution. Clean, effective. 800 years and no one remembered the truth, except for this scroll, forgotten in the basement of an abandoned chapel. Ethan sat down on the floor, right where he was standing. His legs wouldn't hold him. Seraphina looked at him. Lienne approached. She stood beside him. Hana placed her hand on her crossbow, a familiar gesture. Mira pressed Yuna to her chest. Evelyn stood by the door. Yuna held a hammer. Everyone was looking at him. He spoke. His voice was neutral and calm. "It's about me." Seraphina nodded. He continued. "The first healer, from another world, who healed creatures and led them. That is what I do." Seraphina nodded again. Ethan closed his eyes. Warmth in his chest. 6 bonds, 6 points of life. And a voice, that very voice, calm. The one that said, life's duty registered. The voice of the first healer, not dead, dissolved into the very fabric of the bond, waiting, 800 years, for the one who could accept the legacy. Ethan opened his eyes. He looked at Seraphina. He said, the rift in the north, the one that hasn't closed. Seraphina nodded. He said, I have to get there. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then Hana said, between us and the rift lies the barony of Werner, the lands of House Vellard, 4 garrisons, the Inquisition, and a month and a half's journey. Evelyn said, with 36 people and 6 beasts, we won't make it even a third of the way. Ethan replied, I'm not going now. We're not ready. We need more. More people, more creatures, more allies. But I need to know where I'm going, and why. Now I know. Seraphina rolled up the scroll, carefully, like a baby. She said, there's something else. The scroll mentions a condition. The rift cannot be closed by force. It cannot be closed with a seal. It can only be closed with a bond. A sufficient number of bonded creatures must voluntarily return, pass through the rift into the other world, and whoever leads them must go with them. Ethan understood. The first healer did not return. He left with the creatures, to the other side, forever or not. He became the bond, became the voice. He became the mechanism itself, but he had left the world of humans. Ethan looked at his hands, the hands that had sewn up the shadow, that had set Iskra's wing right, that had pulled the spear from Grom's lung. He thought, if I go to the rift, if I lead the creatures back, I won't come back. He didn't say it out loud, but Lienne looked at him, and from her eyes he understood. She knew. The 10th month, an ally. Ethan wasn't looking for him. The ally found Ethan, a young nobleman, Lord Caston of House Morval, a junior house, minor, poor, 3 trees and a crumbling castle. Caston arrived with 2 squires, young, 24 years old, thin, with nervous hands and intelligent eyes. He sat in the mill across from Ethan and spoke quickly. House Morval owed the church, owed House Vellard, owed everyone. Another year and the lands would be taken away. The people would be driven out. The castle would be sold. But if Caston had familiars, at least 2, he could defend his villages, earn a living, pay off his debts, get back on his feet. He couldn't afford seals. A single seal cost as much as his entire barony. But Ethan does this for free. Ethan looked at him. He thought. Then he said, I don't make familiars. I heal the wounded. If there are wounded creatures on your lands, I'll take a look. But a bond isn't a service. It isn't a commodity. I can't sell it or give it away. It arises on its own, between me and the creature. Caston listened, nodded. Then he said, I don't need familiars. I need an ally. I'm tired of bowing to the church that burned my mother's village when I was a child. Ethan looked at him, young, angry, desperate, but honest. That's what he saw. He said, What can you offer? Caston replied. A castle, walls, 30 squires who know how to keep formation, and information. I know when Albrecht Vellard plans to come for you. Ethan froze. He said, When? Caston replied, In the spring, 3 months, 300 squires, 2 church familiars, obsidian golems. Albrecht is gathering his forces. He wants to end it all in one fell swoop, burn Warm Ravine, kill the beasts, capture you, a show trial, a show execution, an example for anyone who decides they can live without the seal. Ethan sat. He was silent. 3 months, 300 armored soldiers, 2 golems, against his 35 men and 6 beasts. The odds agreement, not in his favor. He looked at Caston. He said, I accept the alliance. Caston nodded. He held out his hand. Ethan shook it. The nobleman's hand was thin and bony, but his grip was firm. Caston left that same evening. He promised to send men. He promised to send information. He promised to be there when needed. The 11th month. Ethan was preparing. Evelyn trained the men every day. Drill, weapons, tactics. Yuna forged without paws. Spearheads made from shadow scales. Light, durable, razor sharp. Hana went on reconnaissance, alone, with a crossbow. She returned with maps, with numbers, with routes. Seraphina studied the scrolls. She searched for any information about the seals, about the golems, about weak spots. Lienne prepared supplies of ointments and bandages. Mira helped everyone. Ethan healed. A stream of wounded creatures flowed through Warm Ravine. He didn't know where they came from. He didn't understand why, but they came. Lame, burned, lacerated, hungry, as if someone had told them, "Go there." They don't kill there. They heal there. Ethan healed them all. Every evening he collapsed onto the cot and fell asleep before his head touched the pillow. Through the connection, 10 creatures, then 12. By the end of the 11th month, there were 14 of them. 14 points of life in his chest. 14 breaths. 14 hearts. Ethan woke up with a headache every morning. The connection was draining his strength. He was losing weight. Dark circles formed under his eyes. Lienne noticed. She didn't say anything. Only the portions of broth grew larger. The ointment on his hands thicker. Silent care. Without words. Without reproach. Without pleas to stop. Hana had told the truth. The Baron had come first. Not in the spring. Earlier. Winter. The 12th month. The snow was knee-deep. Smoke from the mill's chimneys rose into the gray sky. Ethan stood by the window and watched as Theo made snowballs and threw them at Grom. The boar stood motionless. The snowballs shattered against his side. Theo cackled. Grom endured it. Through the connection, a quiet, indulgent calm. Like a big dog that lets a puppy bite its ears. Then Yasin raised her head. Abruptly. A sharp signal came through the link. Danger. People. Many. Ethan went out. 20 horsemen. In Baron Werner's colors, red and black, spears, swords, shields. The Baron himself at the front, a large man, broad-shouldered, bearded, in full plate armor. A familiar sat on his shoulder, a small creature the size of a hawk, with scaly wings and a beak dripping with slime. The seal on its collar glowed a dull gold. The Baron stopped at the edge of the ravine. He looked down. He saw the shadow. His horse whinnied, backed away. The Baron pulled on the reins. His eyes found Ethan, small, angry. He said loudly, "You are hiding my wife." Ethan stood at the mill door. Behind him, Evelyn with a sword. Hana stepped out onto the mill roof, with a crossbow, quietly. The Baron did not see her. Ethan replied, "Your wife isn't here. There is a free man here." The Baron flushed. He said, "Hana Cho belongs to me by law and by the marriage contract signed by her father. You are a thief. You are a criminal. You are a blasphemer. I have come to take what is mine." Ethan was silent. Then he said, "She is not a thing." The Baron laughed. 20 knights behind him joined in the laughter, heavy, metallic, from beneath their visors. The Baron said, "For the last time, hand over the woman and the beasts, or I'll take them by force." The shadow rose, slowly, like a mountain that had decided to rise. 6 paws, black scales, 1 red eye. Standing fully upright, she was 3 times taller than the rider. The horses beneath the knights went wild. 3 bolted, 2 riders fell. The Baron held on in the saddle. His familiar on his shoulder let out a shriek, high-pitched, piercing. The shadow turned its head toward him, looked with one eye. The familiar fell silent, pressed itself against its master's shoulder, trembling. Thunder emerged from the pen, heavy, slow, tusk lowered. Smoke from its tail trailed across the snow. Yasin stood to Ethan's right, Lame to his left. Luna sat on the mill's roof next to Hana, silvery fur against the white snow. Iskra flew out the window, spread its wings. The wyvern had grown over these months, wingspan 2 meters, a toothy beak, claws at the tips of its wings. The chick had become a teenager, and it circled above the mill, slowly, ostentatiously. Ethan didn't give orders, didn't ask, didn't command. They came out on their own. 14 creatures, all of them, from the ravine, from the forest, from behind the mill. The ones he had been treating over the past few months. Small hounds, forest beasts with spikes on their backs, one large lizard with 3 tails. They stood behind Ethan, in a semicircle, silently. 14 pairs of eyes stared at the 20 horsemen. Baron watched. His face went pale. 20 armored men against 14 creatures. The math was simple, even without Shadow, who alone was worth a company. The Baron swallowed. Ethan saw his Adam's apple twitch beneath his beard. He said, "Ride away. Return my wife to me unharmed, or I'll come back, with an army." He turned his horse around. The armored men followed him. They rode off. Hana stood on the roof. Her crossbow was lowered. Her face was calm, but Ethan saw it. Her hands were trembling. A small, rapid tremor, not from the cold. She came down. She walked up to him, stood beside him, close, closer than usual, then suddenly grabbed his wrist, tightly. Her fingers were icy. She said, "Why aren't you like that?" Ethan looked at her. She looked at him, dark eyes, without a mask, for the first time, open, unprotected. He replied, "Because you're not a thing." Hana didn't let go of his wrist. A second, 2, 3. Then she let go, turned away, walked toward the mill, stopped halfway, said without turning around, "Albrecht will arrive sooner than we think. The Baron is heading to him right now." She was right. Winter. Warm Ravine was preparing. 40 people. 14 creatures. Caston had sent 10 plate-armored soldiers and a supply wagon. Evelyn was drilling the men in the snow. Yuna was forging day and night. Sparks flew from the forge into the darkness. Seraphina studied everything she could find about golems, church familiars, not alive, constructs made of obsidian, bound by a seal directly to the inquisitor who controls them, strong, slow, almost invulnerable to ordinary weapons. But Seraphina found it. The seal on a golem is its heart. Destroy the seal and the golem crumbles. The seal is located in the center of the chest plate, under a layer of obsidian as thick as a palm. It's impossible to pierce with ordinary weapons. Ethan looked at Hana. Hana looked at her crossbow, then at Yuna. Yuna looked at the shadow's scales. Black, hard, sharp, she said. "I can make a bolt that will pierce the obsidian. From this material." Hana nodded. Ethan nodded. The work began. The girl. The very same girl whose leg Ethan had saved. She was 7. Her name was Ella. She had lived in Warm Ravine with her parents ever since they arrived as refugees 6 months ago. Her leg had healed. The scar remained, long, pink, from knee to ankle. But her leg worked. Ella ran. She jumped. She climbed the rocks in the ravine. She rode on Thunder with Theo. Thunder let them, both of them. 2 children on Shadowtail's back. The boar walked gently, carefully, as if carrying eggs instead of children. Ella wasn't afraid of beasts, not a single one. She hugged Shadow's paw, lay down next to her in the ravine. Shadow, the beast that killed livestock and people, black, 6-legged, one-eyed. It lay next to the 7-year-old girl and didn't move. Through the bond, Ethan could feel it. Shadow was consciously controlling every muscle, every movement, so as not to brush against her, not to crush her, not to scare her. The beast was protecting the child, not by order, by choice. A year and 2 months after Ethan's arrival in Arkein, spring. The snow had melted, the ground was soggy, the ravine was filled with meltwater. The stream swelled and spun the repaired water wheel of the mill at breakneck speed. Ethan stood at the gate of Warm Ravine and looked north. 14 creatures on the link, all calm. Everyone is in place. Everyone feels the same as he does. Anticipation, heavy, thick, like the air before a storm. Albrecht was coming. Hana brought the latest intelligence yesterday. 300 armored soldiers, 2 obsidian golems, infantry, cavalry, a supply train, the banners of House Villard and the Bright Circle, an army. Opposite the mill in the ravine, Caston had sent 20 more men, his best. Now there were 70 fighters in Warm Ravine, not warriors, fighters, peasants with spears, hunters with bows, 2 former plate-armored soldiers, Evelyn, Hana, and 14 beasts, against 300. Ethan hadn't slept for a second night. They came at dawn. Ethan saw them from the hill. A column, long, dark, the glint of steel in the morning light. White banners with a golden circle, cavalry in front. Behind them, infantry. Behind the infantry, Ethan squinted. 2 silhouettes, tall, broad, moving with a heavy mechanical gait. Golems, obsidian, black. Each 3 times the height of a human. On each one's chest, a seal glowed dimly, golden, pulsating. Ethan looked at them and thought. Machines, not alive. Constructs, stone and magic. No pain, no fear, no duty. A connection with them is impossible. This is the only thing he cannot heal, because there is nothing to heal. No life, no suffering, only orders and obedience. He came down from the hill. In Warm Ravine, they already knew. Evelyn was building people. Quiet commands, no shouting, spears in formation, bows behind the spearmen's backs. Hana on the mill's roof. Next to her, 3 bolts made from Shadow's scales, black, long, with faceted tips. Yuna forged them for 7 days. Each bolt is a work of art. Each is signed. The work of Master Yuna. Hana said she needed 2 shots at the golem. The first to pierce the obsidian, the second to shatter the seal. 3 bolts, 2 golems, 1 spare. No room for error. Lienne was in the mill. A table for the wounded, bandages, ointments, needles, thread. Mira nearby, Seraphina nearby. 3 women in the operating room, ready. Yuna stood by the forge, hammer in hand. If the enemy broke through, she would be the last line of defense. Ethan looked at everyone, at each one. 40 people with nowhere else to go, cast out by the world, picked up by him, one by one, month after month. They stood before him with spears and bows and fear in their eyes, but they stood. Albrecht halted the army 200 paces from the ravine. He stepped forward, alone, on a white horse, in a white cloak, a golden circle on his chest, his face. Ethan saw it for the first time. Thin, stern, silver temples, eyes that were light, cold, but not evil. Convinced, the eyes of a man who believes he is doing the right thing. Albrecht spoke. His voice was steady, commanding. Carrying across the field, he offered to surrender, voluntarily. All the people of Warm Ravine would be released. The beasts would be destroyed. Ethan Rice would stand trial before the circle of light. A fair trial, open, by the cannon. Ethan stood at the gate. He listened. Then he replied, "No." Albrecht nodded, as if he had been expecting it. He turned his horse around, his hand raised. The army began to move, the cavalry forward, the infantry behind them, the golems. 2 black silhouettes moved, slowly, heavily. The ground shook with every step. The shadow stood up first. It blocked the ravine. 6 paws spread apart, head lowered. 1 red eye burned. Thunder stepped out beside it, tusks forward. Smoke trailed from its tail, a black cloud spreading across the ground. Ash, lame, moon. All 12 smaller creatures. They lined up, without a command, without an order. A wall of teeth and scales and claws. Between the army and the mill, between 300 plate-armored soldiers and a 7-year-old girl who sat inside, clutching the puppy Ethan had given her last week. Evelyn stood at the gate, sword in hand, shield on her arm. A scar across her eyebrow stood out white against her tanned face. She said, "We hold the gate. We're not retreating." 20 spearmen stood shoulder to shoulder behind her. The cavalry struck first. The shadow took the blow. The horses bolted. 3 riders were thrown from their saddles. The shadow didn't attack the men. She attacked the horses. She didn't kill them. She frightened them. A roar. A single thunderous roar from a throat the size of a barrel. The horses went mad. The cavalry broke ranks. The riders struggled to hold the reins. Thunder rammed the infantry from the side, like a battering ram, not with tusks, with a shoulder. 400 kilograms of muscle and bone. The infantrymen were scattered. The formation broke. Golems. 2 black silhouettes moved through the chaos, slowly, unstoppably. Spears bounced off them. Yasin lunged at the first one. Her teeth gnashed against obsidian, to no avail. The golem struck, a fist the size of a chair. Yasin was sent flying. Ethan felt it through the link. The blow. Pain. Sharp. Yasin got to her feet. She staggered. She retreated. The golem kept moving, toward the gate, toward the mill. Hana on the roof. Crossbow. First bolt. Black. Made from the shadow's scales. She fired. The bolt struck the golem's chest plate. The obsidian cracked. A web of cracks radiated from the point of impact. The seal flickered, but it didn't go out. Hana reloaded, quickly. Her hands moved on their own. Second bolt. Fire. Same spot. The bolt entered the crack. Deeper. Pierced through. The obsidian shattered into fragments. The seal beneath it flared up, brightly, blindingly, and went out. The golem froze. It shuddered and crumbled. Pieces of obsidian crashed to the ground. Black rain. The armored soldiers around her recoiled. Hana exhaled. 1 bolt remained. 1 golem. She took aim. The second golem was heading toward the mill, faster than the first. As if it sensed its brother's demise, Evelyn stood in its path, alone. A sword and shield against a 3-meter-tall stone construct. Madness. She knew it. But she stood her ground. The golem swung. Evelyn stepped aside. A fist struck the ground. A hole. Evelyn slashed at its leg. The sword bounced off. The obsidian didn't yield. She rolled back. The golem spun around. Hana fired. The last bolt. A hit. In the chest. Obsidian cracked, but didn't split. 1 bolt wasn't enough. A second strike was needed, at the same spot. With what? Thunder. A boar. Tusk. Ethan sensed it through the bond. Thunder's intent. Heavy. Stone hard. A decision. The boar charged. 400 kilograms. Tusks like battering rams. It struck the golem's chest, into the crack, right where Hana's bolt had hit. The blow was so powerful that Ethan felt it through the bond like an earthquake. The tusks sank into the obsidian, pierced through. The seal cracked. The golem swayed, froze, crumbled. Thunder retreated, shook his head. The tusks cracked, both of them. Cracks from base to tip, the price of the blow. Through the connection, Ethan felt the boar's pain. Dull, deep. Thunder didn't complain. He stood. He looked at the debris. Smoke swirled triumphantly from his tail. Without the golems, the army faltered. The shadow roared. The beasts attacked from the flanks. Evelyn held the gate. The spearmen stood their ground. Albrecht's armored men retreated, slowly. But they retreated. And then Seraphina stepped out. Ethan saw her. She was walking across the field, alone, unarmed, arms outstretched, palms up. A white shirt, dark hair, bare feet in the mud. She was walking toward her uncle. Albrecht sat on his horse. He looked at her. His face was impassive. Seraphina stopped in front of him. She spoke, quietly. But Ethan somehow heard every word. Maybe through the connection. Maybe because the whole world had fallen silent. She said, "Uncle, enough. Look around. Your golems are dead. Your men are tired. And you know this is wrong. You've always known." Albrecht looked at her. He was silent. And then the mill door opened. Ethan came out. Behind him was Thunder. Ella was sitting on Thunder's back, a little girl, 7 years old, a scar on her leg. She was sitting on the back of a second-rank shadowtail. The creature walked gently, carefully, every step measured, so as not to drop her. Ella held on to the bony growths on the nape of its neck. She wasn't afraid. She was smiling. She looked at Albrecht, at the white horse, at the white cloak, at the golden circle, and she waved her hand. She shouted, "Uncle." "Don't shoot. They're good." She didn't know who he was. She just saw an adult on a horse and decided he needed to know. Albrecht froze. 300 armored soldiers watched, a child on the back of a monster. and the monster walks gently, like a mother carrying a baby. One soldier lowered his spear, stuck it in the ground. A second, a third, a wave. Spears fell one after another, the quiet sound of steel on earth. Albrecht looked at Seraphina, at Ella, at Grom, at Ethan. His face. Ethan saw something breaking behind those pale, cold eyes. Something that had held for 800 years. Something had been held together by the belief that there was a wall between humans and monsters. And the wall was crumbling. Because a 7-year-old girl was waving her hand from the top of that wall. Albrecht closed his eyes, opened them, said one word, "Let's go." He turned his horse around. He rode off, last, without looking back. 300 knights followed him, in silence, spears in the ground. The remains of golems on the field. Silence. Seraphina stood in the field. She watched her uncle ride away. Then she turned to Ethan. She walked over. She stopped. She looked at him, for a long time. Then she said, "Ethan." The first time without master. The first time by name. He replied, "Seraphina." She smiled slightly, tiredly, sadly, but she smiled. Around them, warm ravine. 40 people, 14 creatures, the mill, the ravine, the stream. Everything stands, everything is alive. No one died, not a single person, not a single creature, not a single one of Albrecht's soldiers. Ethan won the battle without killing a single person. He stood in the middle of the field, exhausted, dirty, in a tattered shirt, with dried blood on his hands, not his own. Thunder, ash, ointment, bandages, gloves. He treated his creatures in the heat of battle, ran out between blows, bandaged, smeared ointment, whispered, and returned. 4 hours. For 4 hours he was a veterinarian and a commander and an anchor. Lienne came out of the mill. She approached him, took his hand. His hand was ice cold. Hers was warm. She said, "Go inside, you're falling." He replied, "I need to check on Grom. Tusk, cracks." She said, "In an hour, you first." He didn't argue. He followed her. 14 creatures via the link, all alive, all wounded, but all alive. And him. The 15th, the smallest, the most exhausted, the happiest. A month after the battle, Warm Ravine was recovering. Ethan was healing. Every day, from morning until night. The creature's wounds, cracks in Thunder's tusks, Ash's broken ribs, deep cuts on Shadow's paws from obsidian shards. 14 patients, and people too, bruises, sprains, one broken finger on the spearman whom Thunder had stepped on, accidentally. The boar was worried. Through their bond, Ethan felt his guilt, heavy, oppressive. He told Thunder, "It happens. The finger will heal. Don't worry." Thunder snorted, didn't believe him. Ethan placed his palm on his snout. Tusk cracks, dull, tarnished, but strong. They held. Thunder held, Ethan said quietly. "You saved us all." A warm wave through the bond. Not pride, calm. Grom did what he had to do. No more, no less. Rumors of the battle spread throughout the barony within a week. A man without the seal had stopped the Inquisition's army. The golems were destroyed. Albrecht retreated. No one died. That last part was the most impossible, the most incomprehensible, the most important. People came. They didn't believe it. They stood by the ravine. They looked at the shadow, at Grom, at the ash tree, at the mill, at the children playing among the creatures, and they left in silence, with something new in their eyes, with a crack in what they knew about the world. Warm Ravine grew to 50 people, then to 60. By the end of the month, to 80. Caston sent building materials. The mill was expanded, new houses, a well, pens. Yuna's smithy worked around the clock. Tools stamped with Master Yuna Park's mark were making their way through 3 villages. Customers kept coming back. They asked for more. For the first time in her life, Yuna was working under her own name. She didn't talk about it, but Ethan could see. She stood straighter, head held higher, shoulders back. A small detail. The name on the knife. It had changed her. Lienne walked without a limp, not at all. Ethan noticed it on the 14th day after the battle. She was walking across the yard, even stride, right leg, left, identical, asymmetrical. He watched and couldn't believe it. 8 years of limping, a brace made of bone plates and leather straps, 6 months of wearing it, and here she was, walking, without pain, no compensatory movement, free. She caught his gaze, stopped, looked at her leg, then at him. She said nothing, but that evening she came out onto the porch, as always, sat down beside him, closer than usual. Her shoulder brushed against his, warm, soft. She said, "I want to go with you." He turned. She was looking at him, gray eyes, calm, confident. She said, "To the rift. I want to go with you." Ethan was silent. Then he said, "It might be a one-way trip." She replied, "I know." He looked at his hands, then at her. He said, "All right." She rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time, he didn't move. He sat there, breathing. Through the bond, 14 creatures, all asleep, quiet, calm, and one woman nearby, warm, alive, who wants to go with him into the unknown, because he didn't know why, or maybe he did, but he couldn't say it. Preparing for the journey took 2 months. Ethan wasn't in a hurry. The first healer had waited 800 years. He would wait another 2 months. During that time, the number of connected creatures grew to 30. They came, one after another, wounded, sick, hungry, abandoned. Ethan healed them all. A connection formed. Each time, warmth in his chest. Each time, a voice. A life's duty registered. A voice he now recognized. The voice of the one who had been waiting for him. The voice of the first healer. Dissolved into the very mechanism of the connection, living in every thread that stretched from Ethan to his patients. "You are ready." Ethan did not hear these words, but he felt them. Everyone was with him. Lienne, Seraphina, Hana, Mira, Evelyn, Yuna. 30 people from Warm Ravine, 10 of Kastan's knights, Kastan himself, 30 bound creatures. Theo stayed behind, with Ella, with the families, with those who couldn't walk. Bran had promised to look after them. Warm Ravine remained, home, an anchor, a place to return to. If. Ethan didn't think about if. He thought about the road, about the rift, about what awaited on the other side. The journey took 6 weeks. 6 weeks through lands that changed with each passing day. The green forests of the south gave way to the gray plains of the center. The plains gave way to the black wastelands of the north. The land here was poisoned. Grass did not grow. The trees stood dead, bare, like skeletons. The air smelled of sulfur and something bitter. The closer we got to the rift, the more creatures there were. Not hostile, lost. Wandering aimlessly, small hounds, forest beasts, lizards, winged creatures. They came out to meet Ethan's column. They watched. They sniffed. Some followed behind, unbound, untamed. They just walked, as if they sensed the direction, as if they knew where this man was going, with 30 creatures behind him, and they wanted to go too. By the end of the journey, more than 100 creatures were following Ethan's column. Not his, not bound, free, but following him, because he was heading toward the place from which they had come, home, the Great Rift. Ethan saw it at dawn on the last day. He stood on a hill, he looked, and he couldn't breathe. The rift cut through the earth from horizon to horizon. A crack in the world, wide, deep. A glow rose from it, violet, pulsating, like a sick man's heartbeat. At the edges of the rift, the earth melted and solidified into black glass. A sound came from the depths, not a roar, not a howl, a hum, low, constant, a vibration that entered through the soles of his feet and rose up his spine. 30 bound creatures stood behind Ethan, and more than 100 free ones. All were looking at the rift. All were silent. Through the connection, Ethan sensed it. 30 points of life, 30 breaths, and in all of them, the same thing. Recognition. They knew this place. They remembered, not with their minds, with something deeper, instinct, blood, the other side, home, the place they came from, the place they could return to. Ethan walked down to the edge of the rift, alone. 30 creatures behind him, over 100 behind them. People stood on the hill. Lienne, Seraphina, Hana, Mira, Evelyn, Yuna, Kasten, everyone, watching. Ethan stood at the edge. Violet light fell on his face, warmth in his chest. 30 threads, 30 connections. And a voice, for the first time, not agree, not a life debt registered. Something else, warm, quiet, like a hand on a shoulder. You have come. Ethan closed his eyes. He said, I have come. You have waited a long time, the voice replied. 800 years. Ethan opened his eyes. He looked at the rift. Then he turned around. He looked at the people on the hill, at Lienne. She was standing upright, not limping. Gray eyes. From that distance, he couldn't see them, but he did. She wasn't crying, standing, waiting. He turned toward the rift, and he understood. The first healer was gone, hadn't returned, had dissolved into the bond, had become a mechanism, had lost himself, Ethan thought. No, not like that. Not this time. He stepped toward the rift. 30 creatures stepped after him. Ash first. The ash hound walked beside him, as always, slightly ahead and to the left. Thunder behind him, heavy, reliable. Fangs in the cracks. A shadow to the right. Huge, one-eyed. 6 paws stepped softly, a spark above his head. Wings spread wide. The wyvern had grown, beautiful, swift. The moon on Ethan's shoulder, small, silvery, warm. Lame beside Thunder, dragging a paw slightly. The rest, 24, all of them. They were heading toward the rift, and the free creatures followed them. Not by command, not by the bond, by the call. That very call with which the first healer led thousands home 800 years ago. Ethan did not dissolve into the bond. He did not become a mechanism. He walked toward the rift like a veterinarian walks toward a patient. Calmly, confidently, with gloves in his back pocket. The rift is a wound, open, festering, 800 years without treatment, and he was here to close it. He stood at the very edge. Violet light embraced him. Warmth, not heat, not cold. Warmth. Like Jason's body when she lay down next to him on the first night. A voice said, You don't need to leave. The first one left because he didn't know any other way. You know, Ethan said. Which one? The voice replied. You're already doing it. You heal. You don't kill. You don't take away. You heal. The rift is a wound in the world. Heal it as you heal everything else. Ethan looked at his hands, a veterinarian's hands. Calluses, scars from bites, the ingrained smell of herbs and ointments. He crouched down. He placed his palms on the edge of the rift. The stone was hot. It pulsed, as if alive. 30 creatures stood behind him, 100 free, all of them. Ethan closed his eyes, and through the bond, through all 30 threads, through the warm web that stretched from his heart to 30 hearts, he sent one. Not an order, not a call, not a demand, a request. Go home. Those who want to, go. I won't hold you back. Silence, then movement. The free creatures moved first, one after another. Lizards, hounds, the winged ones. They descended into the rift, calmly, without fear, like a river returning to its bed. A violet light welcomed them, embraced them, dissolved them. They were going home, to the other side, back to where they came from. Dozens, then 100, a stream, steady, smooth. Ethan stood at the edge, his palms on the rock. The connection hummed in his chest. 30 threads. He waited. His 30. Will they go or stay? Their choice, not his. Yasin approached, stood beside him, nuzzled her muzzle against his side. Through the connection, a single word, not a word, a feeling. I staying. Thunder approached, heavy, stood behind him, staying. Shadow, one-eyed, huge. She lay down beside him, staying. Iskra perched on his shoulder, staying. The moon curled up in his arms, staying. Lame lay down at his feet, staying. Of the 30 bound together, 11 went into the rift. Those who were bound more weakly, recently, easily, they went home. 19 remained, with him. Because for them, home was not the rift. Home was a person. The rift was closing, slowly. The edges were pulling together, like a wound under stitches. The violet light dimmed, the rumbling subsided, the earth stopped shaking. Ethan stood at the edge and watched as the crack in the world healed, like skin healing over a cut. A seam, smooth, clean, perfect. He did not dissolve into the connection, did not disappear into the other side, did not become a mechanism. He remained, a human, a veterinarian, one who heals. The voice in his chest said one last thing, thank you, and fell silent. It didn't die. It didn't vanish. It grew quieter, a background noise, a distant echo. The connection remained, 19 threads, warm, alive. The voice of the first healer became part of these threads, dissolved into them, retired. Finally, after 800 years, the rift closed. Ethan stood on level ground. Where there had been a crack a minute ago, there was now a scar, long, dark, made of obsidian glass, but closed, a healed wound. He turned around. His people stood on the hill. Lienne ran down, not limping, down the slope, toward him. He stood and waited. She ran up to him, stopped a step away, looked at him, gray eyes, wet. She said, "You stayed," he replied. "I stayed." She stepped forward, embraced him, tightly, silently. He embraced her in return, for the first time. Through the bond of the 19 creatures, everyone nearby, everyone alive, everyone home. The rest ran down from the hill, Hana, first after Lienne, Seraphina, Mira, Evelyn, Yuna, everyone. They stood around him, around the creatures, at the edge of the closed rift. And Ethan thought, I'm a veterinary technician from Portland, Oregon. I heal those who are in pain. People, animals, the world. It doesn't matter. A wound is a wound, and I'm here to stitch it up. He looked at Yasin. The ash-colored hound sat nearby. Yellow eyes, warm, familiar. The first, the very first, the one it all started with. A thorn in her paw, the fir forest, the cold, fear, and an open palm. Yasin nudged his hand with her muzzle. A wet nose, hot breath. He scratched her behind the ear. He said, "Let's go home." Yasin stood up. She walked beside him, slightly ahead and to the left. As always, just like on the first day. Ethan followed her. Behind him, 19 creatures, and people, his family. They were heading south, toward Warm Ravine, toward the mill, toward home. Behind them, the rift lay silent, sealed, stitched shut, like a wound under a bandage. The world of Arkein breathed more calmly, for the first time in 800 years.